to win the case actually went to trial was a period of 16 months. So this is going to be a long time, not just today, but in the following months and weeks and months that happen afterwards.
Tina, we can see a large crowd right behind you. Are these supporters of Donald Trump who are there right outside the Manhattan court, or as you were pointing out, the anti-Trump camp also gathered outside there at the Manhattan court right now, behind you?
Directly behind me are the Trump supporters, and then to my right is anti-Trump protesters. So we have representatives from both sides out here. They've been incredibly vocal, and it's just been heightened energy, very boisterous, rowdy crowds today. We saw earlier that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene made an appearance, although she did not speak because it was just so hard to get in and out of the park, what with all of the security and all of the crowds and all of the onlookers who are just out here to kind of gawk and take it all in.
Tina, also, you know, if you can help us understand, are there certain processes today that will, in fact, not be followed through because he's a former president, he's a well-known figure, for instance, his mugshot. Much is, you know, there is contradictory information on whether his mugshot will be even taken today or not. And I believe he will not be handcuffed.
It appears that he will not be handcuffed, but reports I'm seeing indicate that he will still have his photograph taken. Alvin Bragg, Manhattan District Attorney, has made it quite clear numerous times that he will be treated like any other citizen who goes through the arraignment process. And so there are no exceptions applied here except for the tightened security in light of the fact that he is a former U.S. president.
The Secret Service is also been roped in for security purposes today. I understand he will be escorted before the judge by the Secret Service.
That's correct. The security efforts have been a joint collaboration between Secret Service, NYPD, U.S. Marshal Service, and state security agencies. So it's definitely a multi-pronged effort and collaboration just because of the highly unusual circumstances surrounding this case.
Tina, May, thanks for getting us all those details from right outside the Manhattan court. As you can see right behind Tina, a large crowd of Trump supporters have gathered outside the Manhattan court. Tina was also pointing out that anti-Trump crowd has also gathered and protests have been on for some time there. This as Donald Trump has just about 10 minutes ago reached the Manhattan court. His arraignment is today. On the right-hand side of your television screens, pictures coming in from the Manhattan, from outside the Manhattan court. On the left-hand side of your television screens, these were pictures from about 10 minutes ago when a cavalcade really with Donald Trump there reaching the Manhattan court from the Trump Tower, where Donald Trump arrived yesterday from Florida, was staying at the Trump Tower and has reached the Manhattan court today. Now, in just a short while, he will first be, his fingerprints will be taken. There is no clarity right now on whether his mugshot will be taken or not. He will not be handcuffed but produced before the judge, where the indictment will be unsealed and we will know the specific charges against Donald Trump. It is widely being reported now that there are at least 30 charges against him in this criminal case against him in the hush money case. Donald Trump there in those pictures on the left-hand side, you'll be able to spot him just about some time back entering the Manhattan court. Let me now introduce our guest who's joining us here on the show, John Bartlett, attorney and Democratic lawyer, joining us here on the show. Many thanks, John Bartlett, for speaking with us. First of all, you know, politically, what does it mean for Donald Trump? Within the Republicans, his poll ratings have only gone up after this indictment and not worsened for him as one would expect.
That's absolutely right, Mahan. Thank you for having me. Good evening. Um, what's happening today is, in one respect, very, very ordinary. Across the U.S. and state and federal courts, individuals are indicted and arraigned for all kinds of crimes from day to day. What's very unusual here, as you pointed out, is the defendant. This is the first time a former United States president is being indicted for a crime, and that's going to have political ramifications as well as legal ones. Right now, that's what you referred to, a lot of support that he's seeing from the Republican Party. But to win an election in the United States, and he is a candidate for president in 2024, you've got to win a majority of the voters, and that's not just the Republicans. That's independent and Democratic voters and others who are really going to be concerned and put off by the fact that you've got an individual running for president who is now under the cloud of this indictment. And, we see coming down the road in the future weeks and months the possibility of other indictments in other matters, from the Georgia election interference case to the federal case regarding handling of confidential documents.
Let me also introduce our other guest on the show, Meenakshi Narula Ahmed is also joining us here. She's the author of A Matter of Trust, U.S.-India Relations from Truman to Trump. Meenakshi, many thanks for joining us here on the show. The similar question to you. His poll ratings within the Republicans have gone up. He's, in fact, left the other contestant for the post of the presidential candidate among the Republicans, who was pretty close earlier, DeSantis, far behind now. But what is the overall assessment? Can Trump turn it around for him? He's calling this a witch hunt, but can he convince the people that it indeed is what he's claiming it to be?
So, Trump is an unusual president. He's the only president that's been impeached twice. He's been acquitted twice, and now he's been indicted. This is a president who has always liked to control the narrative. If you remember, when he ran for president, he had almost 18 Republicans on the podium with him, and he managed to demolish each one of them one by one. And despite everyone saying that DeSantis was going to take over, and including the very powerful Koch brothers, who were putting money behind candidates who were not Trump, and there was a Never Trump movement within the Republican Party. Every single poll number that you looked at showed that Trump was way ahead of any other Republican. And DeSantis seems to have fallen behind pretty spectacularly recently. Just in the last day, the last 24 hours since the indictment, he's managed to raise, almost $1 million. Now, having said all that, having said that he has raised a lot of money and all this very energetic news coming out of his campaign, Trump no longer controls the narrative. He's now a citizen. He's no longer president. Before, he could get up on the podium and say just about anything he wanted. You are equal under the law in the U.S. This is a country which does have the rule of law, and he is going to be tried in a courtroom. So he's not going to be able to just go there and just get away with saying anything he wanted. His lawyer, Michael Cohen, has gone to jail precisely for the crime that he's now going to be in the courthouse for. So we will see when he stands in front of that judge who's going to be sitting above him, and he has to refer to him as sir. Let us see what happens once this whole trial goes forth. It'll be very difficult for Trump, who's used to being president and referred to as sir, for him to be calling the shots. But, it's possible that he'll get acquitted. I mean, other presidents have been very, very anxious about not getting to this point. When Bill Clinton was on trial for, lying and for his various issues with Monica Lewinsky, et cetera, he made a deal with the prosecutors. He didn't want to get to this stage, and he forfeited his license to practice law. There were other cases, I mean, as a matter of fact, now if you talk to presidential historians, they are going through a revision of the pardon that Nixon got and saying that that was a mistake because of that pardon, this is why we now have this situation with Trump. This has given people a sense of immunity, that presidents are such big personalities that they felt that they're not going to be able to get indicted and go to jail. So I think we don't know how this is going to play out. It's going to be a very interesting few months.
Absolutely. And John, a very important point that Meenakshi is making there is the fact that the world's eyes are today trained on the US to see how the judiciary functions, even as the Republicans are saying that this is the weaponizing of the judiciary. How do you assess the situation and perhaps what one could call pressure on the judiciary as well?
Well, the Republicans are exactly wrong there. What today is an example of the principle that is literally written in stone on the U.S. Supreme Court, which is equal justice under law, which is regardless of your background or your privilege, even a former president of the United States, if he has committed crimes and a prosecutor can persuade a grand jury of that, can be indicted, can go through trial and potentially be convicted of those crimes, that you don't become above the law because of political service or wealth or connection or any other reason.
But in this case today, we are seeing a lot of firsts. He will not be handcuffed like the others. He will not be presented before the media as many others are. In fact, the Secret Service has also been roped in. What do we make of that?
Well, I think you have to go back to the reasons for procedures like that. You talk about taking somebody's mugshot. There's probably nobody on the planet that doesn't already know what Donald Trump looks like. He doesn't represent a flight risk in the courthouse, and certainly when he's also surrounded by his own Secret Service agents. So the necessity of handcuffs are just not there. That would be theatrical. This is going to be a process where an individual who has, is about to find out what the indictment contains, but is apparently accused in the indictment of some 30 or so felony crimes, is going to go through the ordinary process. I don't know if they're going to do a mugshot. Your correspondent earlier pointed out that they may or may not take his photograph. But again, that's not a necessary part of the procedure for somebody like Donald Trump, who's as photographed as he is. What this is really about today is that if you have committed a crime, then you're going to answer for it without regard to privilege, without regard to your past service as president or in any other office.
All right, Meenakshi and Narula, I'll just come to you in a bit. Let me quickly point out to our viewers that these are live pictures on the left-hand side of their television screens that they can see at the moment. Remember, the coverage inside of the courtroom is not allowed today. These are all visuals that are coming in from outside the courtroom, but you can get a sense of the kind of security arrangements that are in place at the moment. You can see a lot of security officials there in the corridor leading up to the courtroom. The Secret Service, as we have been pointing out, has been roped in as well. They're going to escort Donald Trump to when he appears before the judge today. Then the indictment will be unsealed and the specific charges against him will in fact be known to Donald Trump as well as to the rest of the public. After which Donald Trump, as his legal team has pointed out already, will plead not guilty in this matter. Donald Trump is going to address his supporters at 5:45 a.m. Indian Standard Time. That is tomorrow morning. It will be tonight in the U.S. Once he flies back to Florida. At least that's what has been pointed out by his team. Meenakshi, Narula, coming back to you now. This whole episode that we are seeing unfold, for any other person, perhaps, this could have come as a matter of grave embarrassment that they are being presented before a court. Criminal charges are being pronounced against them. But for Donald Trump, he is brazening it out. Is that the hallmark of Donald Trump? Is that what he is as a person?
Well, Donald Trump has always liked attention. He's always liked to be the center of attention, whether it's good attention or bad attention. This is something he's always fed on.
So you
he has
I
a
think
very
that's
large
exactly
ego.
right.
I don't think you can remove Donald Trump from his ego, and he'll make use of it. He'll make use of it to raise money. He'll make use of it with his base. So he'll get extended mileage out of it, no matter what. But it's interesting to see that the entire Republican Party has sort of, it's almost like a race to support him. Donald Trump still wields a very powerful hand over his party. He's got a very devoted base, and people have their eye on his base. And so he has a way of diminishing people, lying Ted Cruz, low energy Bush, sanctimonious, DeSantis. He has a way of calling people names that stick and just sort of completely demoting them in a way. And so they are all a little bit petrified of him, because he can sort of, with his words, just turn a whole mob against them. So I think they've all sort of lined up against him, and lined up for him. They've all rushed to support him. Now, it'll be very interesting once they're on the campaign trail and they have to, and they're campaigning against him as president, once they start to sort of throw their hat in the ring, how that plays out.
But as of today, John Bartlett, I want to come back to you. We are seeing a crowd of Trump supporters outside the Manhattan court. But after what we saw on the 6th of January, the insurrection, do you think his supporters will be wary of any sort of violent acts now?
I think you found exactly the right parallel there, Maha. I was thinking about that this morning. One of the other things, and Meenakshi did a nice job of explaining some of the ways that Donald Trump is very unique as a political candidate. One of the very unique things about him is that he uses that power he has over his supporters to bring them together and to point them at whatever entity he sees as standing in his way. And in January 6th, that was the United States Congress that was gathering to confirm the election of Joe Biden as president. And Donald Trump said to his supporters, come to Washington on January 6th. It's going to be wild. He got up in front of them, on the National Mall and said, go to the Capitol, make your voice heard. And the result of that was the January 6th events that everyone now is very familiar with. He's done the same thing here. He's doing it in a little bit different context. New York is ready for this. The New York police, the other officials there are ready for whatever might take place. And I don't expect violence today. And I also think, and I haven't seen all the pictures, but just from the pictures that I've seen on your network and elsewhere, it's not the kind of huge crowd that you saw on January 6th. I think Meenakshi is exactly right that there's a lot of people in the Republican Party that regard Trump's base as an essential part of their support. But we also have to see the way in which that base is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. The more that it sees about, what January 6th really was, the more that it sees as leaks and information come out about all of these criminal investigations, who Donald Trump is, and contemplate the question of who do they really want as their Republican standard bearer in 2024, I think you're going to see that support shrink despite Trump's best efforts. And we'll see what that ultimately does within the Republican Party, because, of course, in the United States, before you can face the voters and run against a Democrat in November, you've got to face the voters in your own party. And that's where Trump still has a tremendous amount of support. And he may very well survive that primary election for 2024. But then coming in front of independent and Democratic voters, folks that aren't getting all of their news out of the right-wing news machine, but are understanding that, somebody who's been indicted, somebody who's been investigated, somebody with all this, photographic proof and apparently video proof that we're seeing regarding handling of confidential and classified federal government documents after his presidency, has a profound problem when it comes to going to those voters and saying, you know what, let me run the country for another 4 years.
John, I want some issues or points clarified here with regards to the processes. Can you help us understand, first of all, typically how long will it take today for Donald Trump in court? Some of the processes we already know. His fingerprints will be taken, mugshot may or may not be taken, and then he'll be presented before the judge. Also, CNN reports that he was taken in custody. Is that procedural?
It is. Today's process is, today's piece of the process, the arraignment, is actually usually fairly short. I think it's going to be a bit extended because of the kind of person that Trump is, the attention that this is getting, the fact that, as you pointed out, the Secret Service is also part of this. While he's going through all of the different offices within the court that you go through an arraignment, he's still under the protection of the U.S. Secret Service. So that adds a different dimension from any other defendant going through those same proceedings. But today, an ordinary arraignment tends to be pretty short. The charges are read. The defendant is given the opportunity to plead guilty or not guilty. Of course, we understand President Trump is going to plead not guilty, not surprisingly. But then this begins another longer process, which will be moving the case towards trial. One of the unfortunate things, and here I'm speaking as a lawyer in the United States, folks watch these 1-hour television shows about the law and get the sense the cases happen very quickly and that things wrap up kind of by the time the last commercial break comes. And in fact, what we're seeing right now is that this indictment has been the product of months of witness after witness after witness coming to the grand jury to testify. And it's going to begin a process that's going to last additional months and years going forward as the case moves towards trial and all of the processes of discovery go down. Meanwhile, in parallel, in other jurisdictions like Georgia, like the federal investigation regarding confidential documents, there may be additional indictments, additional procedures that move forward elsewhere. We're going to watch all of those shake out in the weeks and months ahead.
So, Meenakshi, as far as Donald Trump is concerned, he has already, it's widely known, because that has already been pretty much made public, that he will address his supporters after reaching Florida, after this arraignment process. But going by his personality, as you were talking about how he is able to utilize a situation of this nature, turn it around for himself, can we expect him perhaps then to address his supporters in New York? Anything that we are picking up at the moment which you can share?
Well, it's difficult to speculate. I have no idea, because Donald Trump often does things off the cuff. But you have to bear in mind that Manhattan is not his fan club. Manhattan. Typically, it's a liberal place. It's not a place that Donald Trump has a lot of fans in. So he's not going to be speaking to his base there. He'll get booed. There are lots of people there who don't like him. So he's more comfortable in Florida, where typically, he has people who support him. So he'd rather go to a place where he's comfortable, where he's loved, and where he feels he'll be received more warmly. So I can see why. The other thing is that don't forget that in New York, it's a very tightly controlled security arena. The police there and the security apparatus there is very used to shuttling heads of state during the UN and during all the various, when they come through. And so they have a very tightly controlled system for shuttling people around. And so they're not, and they made it very clear that they're not going to allow crowds, they're not going to tolerate violence. So it's going to be a very constrained setup there, especially because everyone lives in tall buildings and there's a lot of security around where he lives. So I don't anticipate that that's going to be a place where he's going to be comfortable holding forth unless he happens to come across a crowd right as he's entering his building and he decides to off the cuff, go off script, which he could. But I think it's important to remember I'm not a lawyer, but I just think it's important to remember this case is maybe the weakest one. And it's important to remember that, they may have problems finding jurors that the other side is going to be happy with. So it may take some time. And it also, there are going to be other cases that are going to come down the pipeline, and it's good. This is all going to play out in the next several months, and it's going to be quite a long-winded. We're going to see a lot of Donald Trump in the next few months, and it'll be interesting to see whether this whole process diminishes him in the long term, whether people get tired of it, of all the drama. And get reminded what it's like to have a potential president who's full of drama.
Right, but yes, that's correct, because from from the indictment to the trial verdict, the average that has been taken is about 900 days in a Manhattan court. I was reading a report that had given an average of the number of days to reach that point of the verdict. So it's really going to be a long haul, which means that the 2024 elections would be over by then. But that again will make it interesting, isn't it, John Bartlett, in an unusual sort of manner, unprecedented. If he is elected president, say, for instance, he would be the first one to be under trial while, he is president. And I understand he can't pardon himself of these charges if he is held guilty, is it?
That's correct. His pardon power, if he were to return to the presidency, is limited to federal crimes. These crimes that he's indicted for today are state crimes. So you're absolutely right. That pardon power lies with the governor of New York, not with the president of the United States. It raises an interesting question. He's the first former president to be indicted. I'm not aware of any past president who went through any sort of process of trial during their presidency. My guess would be they very might well hit the pause button in the event that he's elected president and have to wait in the same way that there are certain circumstances where you've got to wait until a presidency is concluded to take evidence and to take a president through those processes. We haven't seen much of this, happily, in the United States, where we have to answer these questions. But what we have seen is that consistently, New York is the financial center of the United States. So the crime of falsifying business records is very commonly prosecuted there. The federal crime of removing or mishandling classified documents is very frequently prosecuted, albeit not usually against former presidents, usually against other federal employees. The election interference in Georgia, in different respects in different states, has been prosecuted before. So none of this is unprecedented. What's really unprecedented is the man at the center of it. Donald Trump. And that's a real misfortune, because the time that we spend talking about Donald Trump and about these matters is time, unfortunately, that American voters aren't able to spend talking about our epidemic of gun violence, talking about the way in which state legislatures are rolling back voting rights all over the country, talk about the emergence of book banning in schools. The things that we're not talking about because we're all here watching live in Manhattan, and what's going to happen next to Donald Trump is really something that I hope the emergence of the 2024 campaign and hopefully a serious conversation that brings us about the direction of the country. Maybe we can focus on the issues and not on the people.
Meenakshi, unfortunately, as John Bartlett is pointing out there, do you think Donald Trump in some sense is driving the agenda, the narrative here? Because as John is pointing out, there are so many other important issues. But at the end of the day, this is almost like a personality-driven reality TV show.
Well, Joe Biden hasn't declared that he's running right now. So for now, I think the focus is entirely on the Republican primary. I think the conversation is really about the Republican race, and he is definitely going to drive that particular conversation.
And And that is something that you
think
think possibly the Republicans can use to their advantage?
Look, he's most likely going to be the nominee. I mean, I don't want to be a political pundit here. I don't have the expertise, but my guess is that he will most likely be the Republican nominee. If you listen to the two experts who I put my stock in, which is Susan Glasser, who wrote the fabulous book with her husband, Trump, The Divider, and Maggie Haberman, who's written the other incredible book about Trump and who he considers his personal confidant. I think they both think that he's going to be the Republican nominee. So I'll take their word for it. I mean, my guess is that he will be the Republican nominee. And if they're correct, and he is, and all these various trials don't diminish him to the point that he isn't, then we are faced with a whole different dilemma. It's going to be Trump versus who, and on the Democratic side. If Biden decides he's going to run, then we have to deal with the fact that he's going to be an 82-year-old president. And what does that mean? That's a different conversation.
All right. Let me quickly point out to our viewers that this is what Donald Trump has in fact put out by way of his handle there on Truth Social, where he is talking about just leaving for the Manhattan court. I think it's been put out by him just before that. Heading to Lower Manhattan, the courthouse seems so surreal. Wow, they are going to arrest me. Can't believe this is happening in America. Make America great again. John Bartlett, since yesterday, Donald Trump has been putting this message out. Make America great again. His campaign catchphrase from the last time around. What does it help you understand, give you an insight into what is going on in Donald Trump's mind? Clearly using this politically?
Like everything else in Donald Trump's mind, this is entirely about Donald Trump, who I think in his mind can do no wrong. Anything he does is justified in his mind. Anything he believes must be the truth. He literally, after getting kicked off Twitter, founded an alternate network called Truth Social. What I think today brings us is another chance to see how detached a lot of that is from reality, and how you can keep saying, make America great again, and throwing out campaign slogans. But the more that these investigations close in on Trump, the more information that we get about what he did and what evidence came about to lead the grand jury to conclude that there were 30 or more felonies that this man ought to be charged with, that is all going to diminish him, and slogans aren't going to save him. What we've seen today and what we're continuing to see is that however long it took, however frustrating it is to watch, we have in this country a system of laws where whatever your privilege, whatever your background, if you committed crimes, then you're going to be called to account for them. And that's a good thing.
Meenakshi, I want you to point out two aspects here. One that can work in favor of Donald Trump, and one that can go against him. Are the charges that will be pronounced today, or the public will know when that indictment is unsealed, are those charges going to be damaging enough for him? Because these are criminal charges.
Well, charges are always going to be damaging. It might fire up his base because, he'll go around using it and saying that it's a witch hunt. But I think we have to remember that Donald Trump has a very devoted base, but it's a small base. And you can't win an election with a small base. He can't win an election without the independents. And I think the independents are tired of him. Now, at least I'm hoping they are. So Donald Trump will have to win a lot more than just his base to get anywhere in 2024. And I don't think that these trials are going to really help him win an election.
All right.
I think it'll help him. It may help him with his base, but I don't think it'll help him win an election. I don't think it's going to help the big picture.
All right. We'll take a very quick break at this point. We'll be back with a lot more, and we'll try to get a sense of what's happening at the moment. We'll be joined by the Voice of America correspondent there. Tina will be joining us in just a bit. Our guests are going to stay with us. Taking a very quick break. Back with more.
In 20 years since we started, this music has been with you. Now, we want you to share your version of it. Let your inner artists out by creating an incredible remix of the NDTV signature track. Log on to ndtv.com/bestofndtv. Get inspired and submit your rendition. One winner gets an all-expense-paid holiday for two. NDTV 24/7 20th year celebration.
This is NDTV. No noise, no shouting, and most importantly, no lies. Our lead story tonight. Big international story India is closely watching. News that informs and inspires.
The News with Sonia Singh. Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. only on NDTV 24/7.
The only side we're on is yours.
Cross the distance between darkness and vision. Teach a generation that has lost all hope. Treat a patient from thousands of miles away. None of this was possible
till technology stepped in and made it possible. A selection of the finest stories from across the country where technology comes with a human touch.
Unleash your dreams with Snapdragon in collaboration with NDTV, only on the NDTV network.
20 years since we started, this music has been with you, playing in your homes, at work, and in your car. Now, we want you to share your version of it. Calling all music buffs from across India to let your inner artists out by creating an incredible remix of the NDTV signature track for the world to hear. Log on to ndtv.com/bestofndtv to access the original track. Get inspired and submit your rendition. One winner gets an all-expense-paid holiday for two to the luxurious Alila Fort, Bishangarh, Rajasthan. NDTV 24/7 20th year celebrations.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with all your tech needs.
Gadget 360, Gadget Love.
Gadgets 360, Gadgets Love. You too can get some gadget love with buying guides, expert reviews, and all the latest news on Gadgets 360.
Debates are essential not just for journalism, but for humanity. It ignites our mind, opens it up for counter-opinion.
These are live shots coming in from outside the Lower Manhattan Court in New York, where Donald Trump is inside at the moment. This is the arraignment that he's going through. He arrived at the court about 45 minutes ago. He was under arrest, taken into custody. This is procedural, as he will be made to appear before a judge where his indictment will be unsealed, and then the charges against him will be read out. These are pictures now coming in from outside the courtroom, outside the court, sorry. Donald Trump is expected to go through some of the processes which include his fingerprints that will be taken, whether or not his mugshot is taken, that remains unclear. That's largely because he is well known. He is not a flight risk, as has been pointed out by one of the commentators. Meanwhile, the Secret Service has also been roped in today. While this arraignment is on, the Secret Service has accompanied him. They will be escorting to him before the judge. This is again part of the procedure where, as I was pointing out, the indictment will be unsealed. The indictment by the grand jury. That will be unsealed. The specific charges against him will be made known to Donald Trump, and then it will be made available as well for the public. These specific charges, as is being reported, are likely to be around 30 charges that will be read out against him, after which Donald Trump will plead not guilty, as his legal team has already pointed out. So here's a rough sketch of the processes that we are seeing today. So what we've already seen is that the Secret Service has accompanied Donald Trump to the district attorney's office, which is in the same building as the courthouse. Trump has been booked by the investigators. This will include taking his fingerprints, all these processes taking place inside. Ordinarily, a mugshot is taken, but sources and what is being reported so far is that that is uncertain at the moment, whether or not his mugshot is taken. Then the courtroom, the processes there start after these processes take place, that is fingerprinting, mugshot. Trump will be taken through the back set of the hallways and elevators to the floor where the courtroom is located. He'll then come out to the public hallway to walk into the courtroom. Trump is not expected to be handcuffed. This is already something that has been pointed out in the past as well. Trump is then expected to be brought to the courtroom where the indictment will be unsealed. He will formally face the charges against him. After he's arraigned, Trump will most certainly be released. That is what is being reported at the moment from the US. It's possible, it's however unlikely that there will be any conditions set on his travel. As we were pointing out, one of the commentators there saying he is not a flight risk. He will then be leaving the courthouse once the court hearing is over. He's expected to once again walk through the public hallway into the back corridors to the district attorney's office and back to his motorcade, which will be waiting for him. He is expected to fly back to Florida, where he is then expected tonight in the United States to address his supporters. There are some reports coming in which suggest that it is possible that he may want to address some of his supporters in New York as well. However, that remains unclear, considering that his base, Mar-a-Lago, is where he'll be most comfortable to address his supporters. It is likely that that is going to happen at 5:45 a.m. Indian Standard Time Wednesday, which is late in the night in the United States. Around 8 to 9 p.m. is when we expect that to happen in Florida. Our guests are there with us, still getting us some more perspective into what we should be expecting. John Bartlett and Meenakshi Narula Ahmed, both with us. John, coming back to you now. So it's almost been 45 minutes since Donald Trump arrived at the courthouse. How much longer does it typically take in a case of this nature?
It shouldn't be too much longer. I imagine that there's no line. That the rooms that all these things are taking place in, like the fingerprinting, have been cleared to make room for Trump and his Secret Service that is with him. It should not be too much longer. But again, also once they go into the courtroom, as is consistent standard practice in New York courts, there are no television cameras. It's not like a lot of trials that you may have gotten to watch. New York is pretty strict and consistent that cameras are not allowed in the courtroom. So they'll enter the courtroom and the charges in the indictment will be read out. If it is indeed 30 or 34 charges, and if each of them has a couple of paragraphs, that could take some time. That could take up to an hour. They may have him plead not guilty to one of them at a time as they go. They may have him enter his plea at the very end, since it's obviously going to be not guilty to all. But it could take an hour once they're in the courtroom.
Also, as we have been pointing out, there are some processes that always take place normally, like fingerprints that are taken, mugshot that is taken. Handcuffing has not happened here. As you were pointing out, in this case, a mugshot might not happen because he is a well-known person. Also, as is being reported by some US media outlets, that it is unlikely that conditions could be set on his travel. You were pointing out earlier that's because possibly he's not a flight risk. So we aren't seeing any major shift or accommodation that is being made by the judiciary just because he's a former president. Is it, John?
I think that's right. There are specific security concerns for somebody like him, which is why I say they probably have emptied out all those rooms. The hallways are clear of anybody but police. Obviously, there's plenty of NYPD and other police coverage in the blocks around the courthouse. But for the most part, other than the proceedings that are obviously unnecessary, like handcuffing, he's being treated like anybody else who is surrendering and coming in to be arraigned, with the fingerprinting and the other parts of the process.
Meenakshi Narula, coming back to the politics of it all, as Donald Trump has already called this some sort of witch hunt, the Republicans have been saying pretty much the same. This is clearly not just a legal battle for Donald Trump or the Republicans. This is a political battle as well. Has it come, in some sense, for a person like Donald Trump at an opportune time? Because DeSantis was very close in ratings to Donald Trump, and now he's been left behind. He's slumped by 11 percentage points, is what we understand in some of the polls recently.
Well, I think it's a bit of a fallacy to say that DeSantis was any sort of a serious threat. I think if you looked at any of the poll numbers, any of the really well-established poll numbers, Donald Trump was still clearly ahead in all the polls. You could see that Nikki Haley was in the single digit. Everyone was in the single digits. Maybe DeSantis was in the low double digits. No one really came close to Donald Trump. So I don't think anyone was a serious threat at this stage.
And why is that so? Why is that so, Meenakshi, considering that his first term as president was also riddled with controversies?
Look, I think the country, as long as there is inequality, I think the U.S. has a serious problem with inequality, and I think that there is also a deep sort of immigration in this country has increased substantially, and if you think about it, immigration up in the early years, going in, starting in after World War II, heading to almost 1960, you had mainly European immigration. It was about 85% European. And now you have 85% of the immigration that's coming in is non-European. That's a pretty big flip. So there is a sense, and the country has become, I think it's now 65% white. It's dropped substantially. So there is a sense that the country is changing. It's ethnic mix, it's in diversity. So there are a lot of changes taking place. And I think Donald Trump has tapped into a certain sense of anxiety and a certain sense of, and as well as economic inequality. and he's been able to channel that very effectively. And he's been able to address that anger that some other politicians haven't done effectively.
But John, sometimes it's very hard to understand that in a country like US, which is a land of migrants, largely people go to America for the opportunities, as it says, it offers. In a country of that nature, with such a mix of people, how has he been able to, as the Democrats would like to say it, drawn a wedge between people?
Yeah, well, I think Meenakshi, gave you some of the seeds of it. Diversity in the U.S. is a relatively new phenomenon. Until 1965, immigration from almost anywhere but Northwestern Europe was virtually impossible. And since then, as I'm sure, we now know there are millions of Indian Americans who can tell this story, as well as people from all over the rest of the world. There are opportunities here, but there's still that core of folks who, and think about Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again." So they've identified some point in time in the past, which he sort of leaves it up to all of us to figure out what point in time that is, so we can all assign our favorite memory to it. But there's this imaginary point in time in the past when America was great, and now it's not, because of largely the laundry list of people that Trump and the Republican Party want to target and want to scapegoat and want to say, this is why you have this feeling that America is falling behind. It's not because of our suffering infrastructure or inadequate education systems. It's because these people or those people are arriving or gaining power or what have you. You started your question talking about Ron DeSantis and the question of who are the alternatives to Trump. I think there was a point in time as people started thinking about the 2024 presidential race where the question was, who else could it be besides Trump? And DeSantis was one of the first people that folks latched onto because he's doing a lot of the things that are popular in the Republican Party right now, targeting immigrants, targeting LGBT people, targeting teachers with the idea that somehow there's this woke, ideology that's behind the teaching of things like an accurate version of U.S. history. Or behind strategies to make sure that all kinds of kids, whatever their religion, whatever their parents, whatever their gender identity or sexual orientation, to feel welcome and safe in schools. And to turn that into something that is somehow imagined as un-American, and to turn that into a slogan that motivates Republican voters. Trump did that better than anybody in a generation or two. And that party is now looking for who's the next person that can stoke all that anger and pull all those levers, but not be Donald Trump with all his baggage. And it looked like it was Ron DeSantis, but then Ron DeSantis got on the camera and started talking and embarrassed himself. And probably now it's not Ron DeSantis. Who will it be? We'll see who emerges, because they've got this core dilemma as Republicans, which is they need to win their primary, but Republicans that don't fall in line behind Donald Trump get clobbered in the primary. People like Congresswoman Congressman Liz Cheney, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who served on the January 6th Commission as Republican members of Congress. And because of that, were primaried and were knocked out of their seats in Congress in that Republican primary. That's the dilemma that the Republican Party has, and it's the dilemma that all those other would-be presidents, whether it's Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Asa Hutchinson, who just joined the race, or any of the others. That's their dilemma. How do I separate myself from Trump while still making sure I'm making all the same people angry about the same things in order to win my Republican primary election?
Interesting insight there, John. I'll hold you there for a bit because we have with us on the line Namrata Barar, who's joining us right from outside the Manhattan court. Namrata, I understand that you have some information coming through at the moment. Take us through the details. All right, we can see, Namrata, just hold on to your thoughts there. We just have pictures of Donald Trump there. In that courtroom or outside the courtroom is what we understand. Is he now being taken to appear before the judge? We'll get some details of that in just a bit. Namrata, I believe you have some details. Take us through the details.
Yes, you're seeing pictures of him in the hallway, and then he will be read out all the charges against him, which are likely to be about 30 or 32 felony charges. I think what is interesting about today is not the fact that it is historically unprecedented that a former U.S. president has been arrested, has been indicted on criminal charges at a Manhattan criminal court like any other criminal. I think what is fascinating about today is the way he has used this almost devastating sort of attack on him to his advantage, to his electoral advantage. And I think what we are witnessing today is a new way that electoral campaigns will be run as a run-up to the 2024 presidential elections. I can hear lots of helicopters also hovering around me. That started just minutes before Donald Trump made that entry. And, there is a heightened sense on both sides of the political platform on what this arrest today will mean for sentiments as well as mass political movements backing Donald Trump going ahead.
All right, so Namrata, the visuals that we have just seen on our television screens, and we'll play those out again, of Donald Trump in the hallway, means that he's now appearing before the judge, and his indictment is being unsealed right now, and the charges will be read out. Are we getting the process correct here? His fingerprints and all other processes are now over?
That's correct. He has been formally arrested, and now all the charges will be read out to him. These are likely to include felony charges. After that, this is the same judge now, remember, who has proceeded against some of the trials of Trump's colleagues, including Paul Manafort. So there has been bad blood with the Trump team, and not just the district attorney, but also the judge presiding over the indictment today. But how the legal system works is that after those charges are read out, Donald Trump's team will put his plea there. He is going to plead not guilty, and then be out on that. As I said before, he's going to be returning to Mar-a-Lago in Florida. That's his home base right now. And he's going to be making that press conference along with a gathering of about 500 of his key supporters. As we are talking also, his fundraising team has been really active. In fact, they've been tweeting about the fact that this is a witch hunt against Donald Trump. And there is no way he's going to let the left-wing mob, as they call it, win. And they're asking for more and more contributions to really bolster their coffers here. I also just want to say that whatever happens today is not going to be the final play out. This is going to take months at best, if not years. And we might also end up with a no conviction, because the legal system first needs a jury. You need a 12-member jury here in New York City to be formed, which has been to be mutually agreed from both sides. So both the Trump team as well as the district attorney's office have to find a common ground, which is very unlikely when you're convicting someone with the kind of popularity and the brand that Donald Trump has, because each and every member of this jury is going to be asked, do you know this man? Do you have strong feelings against this man? Do you have strong feelings one way or the other for this man? And if there is one person who has been divisive in his career, that is Donald Trump.
Namrata, also take us through the scenes outside the courtroom that you're witnessing. I understand that there are Trump supporters who have been protesting since morning there. There are also there's an anti-Trump camp that also is there at the same spot. So what's happening outside the courtroom?
Yes, it is quite interesting, because when I covered the 2016 elections, we saw the kind of angst and the kind of almost, serious amount of hatred and vitriol which was being expressed, particularly by Donald Trump supporters. This time around, it seems that they've been almost consciously told to tone it down. Now, whether this is because of the January 6th Capitol Hill riots, where we all know how that played out against what is considered the biggest attack that the United States America's free democracy and the highest officers faced, there has been a conscious effort, it seems, from both Republicans as well as Trump's team to tone it down. Yes, it's the usual mixture. There are very strong, ardent, vocal supporters, but they're also trying to give more build-up to people of color, to blacks for Trump, to Asians for Trump. I actually met somebody who's an Indian living here in New York City from the 1970s who's supporting Trump. So there is a range of voices which is interesting, because that's one aspect which Donald Trump has constantly been attacked on. Even in the run-up today, he's attacking the district attorney as being a Soros-backed animal. There are racist elements to slurs, time and again being brought up. But I think there seems to be the vast majority of Republicans which have come together to support Donald Trump despite his past remarks, and they are trying to promote more sort of feasible, a more moderate version of him.
So, Namrata, are we likely to see Trump only address his supporters once he reaches Florida, or is there any possibility that he might want to address those who are out supporting him today outside the court as well in Manhattan?
You know, with Donald Trump, anything is possible. I think any reporter can sort of rest their career on this. I don't think anyone out there knows exactly what that man is thinking. I can tell you that I spoke to a lot of the supporters who were convinced that Donald Trump will come and wave to them, show some kind of, acknowledgement of their solidarity and support. They've been camping here overnight, many of them refusing to leave. They just want a glimpse of Donald Trump. And yes, it is possible, as is anything is possible. I mean, the fact that we are debating this and we are debating what has been two historical impeachments of a president, then again this indictment, which is also expected to be the first of many, remind you. We believe many other states will start trying him for his role in Capitol Hill riots, his role in taking those documents to Mar-a-Lago, his personal estate, and his role in various business frauds along with the Georgia election interference. So all those charges are bound to come up. But right now, just expect the unexpected from Donald Trump.
Interesting that you mentioned there about how people were expecting him to possibly wave, which didn't really happen. He seems to be wearing a very somber look today from the visuals that have come in, Namrata, much unlike his character.
Absolutely. In fact, I think the run-up of this over the last 48 hours, the news that I was picking up was that there's been a huge amount of debate, not on how they're going to fight those charges, but a huge amount of debate on whether Donald Trump should be seen smiling, should be seen looking very casual or unflustered, or should he put up a serious and a somber expression? I think that was what a lot of people were debating about, which is interesting. And it might sound trivial given the scope of the charges against him. But I think that is important messaging from Donald Trump. A lot of his lawyers, his team, he's hired a top white-collar criminal lawyer right now. A lot of them feel that they do not want Donald Trump to be on the witness stand and say anything which might get him into more trouble than the 30-plus counts which are filed against him right now. So that is the dilemma. They just want to rein Donald Trump in, just present a serious face, get this done, here are all those charges, and expect that case to continue to eternity if at all it comes to fruition. That is the hope from the Trump camp, and they're trying their best to as possible.
All right, Namrata, thanks for joining us with all those details. We'll come back to you in just a bit. Let me go across to John Bartlett on that particular point about the demeanor of Donald Trump today. John, as Namrata was saying, that this might sound a little trivial at this juncture, but at the end of the day, if Donald Trump is using this politically, then image building or PR, even in the manner in which he's conducting himself today, becomes very significant, isn't it?
I think that's true. And I also think that he's having a different experience today than he's ever had before. And I think, we should, remember that this is a very human experience. He's been involved in thousands of litigations involving his various businesses over the course of many, many decades. But that's all civil litigation. That's all business disputes, where the worst thing that happens is you lose a lot of money. This is the first time that Donald Trump is being called to account in a criminal court. And he's had that experience now of being fingerprinted and feeling that ink on his fingertips. He's had the experience of having his rights read to him that if you've watched an American TV crime drama, you've heard the right to remain silent and so forth, which, by the way, are all constitutional rights that are being extended to a gentleman who has said that we should discard the Constitution, terminate the Constitution, was his words, if that's what it takes to get him back into power despite his defeat in the 2020 election. So he was enjoying constitutional rights that he would very much like to deny others and to deny all of us. But he's having an experience like never before. This isn't getting sued. This is a procedure where you as an individual, not your lawyer, not your CEO, CFO, or your business partners, you are in court and you as a person are facing the possibility of the loss of your liberty, of going to jail for the things that you've done. This is a first for him in that regard. So his demeanor is very, very somber. I know you read out earlier his post on the internet where he called this process surreal. I imagine this is nothing that he, with all of his money and all of his power and the way that he's walked through the world with privilege for his entire life, this is probably a day he never thought would actually come.
What, John, many would find difficult to understand in this case regarding hush money is that Donald Trump has been known now and has been involved in controversies. Why is it that, as is being alleged, did he or his those around him feel the need to hush up this particular case?
Well, you have to remember when it happened. It was in the fall of 2016, on the eve of the presidential election. He had already been dealing with the video from Access Hollywood, where he talked about the way he felt entitled to grab women. He had already been dealing with a whole lot of questions and concerns about parts of his personal life that raised questions about his character and his fitness for office. So at that particular moment, I have to imagine that revelations of an affair with a porn star would have had some effect on the electorate. And remember, he lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by nearly 3 million votes. He won because of our electoral college system by getting ahead in a few key states like Michigan and Wisconsin and getting those electoral votes. But he was defeated. He's never won the popular vote. The fact that he was on the verge of winning or losing, and the opportunity to pay this money the way that apparently he did, directing his lawyer Michael Cohen to do so, that may have been what gave him that edge, that tiny little bit of not losing those voters who had concerns about his character and the way that he conducted himself with women, and he got the presidency out of it. So. Folks talk about this as relatively minor in some respect compared to election interference in Georgia, compared to mishandling classified documents. At the same time, this is probably a very, very serious case in the story of the history of this country, because by not having that news come out weeks before election 2016 may very well be why we had a President Donald Trump and not a President Hillary Clinton.
Meenakshi is also there with us. Let me go across to her. Meenakshi, just a short while back, I was speaking to Namrata and also to John with regards to the demeanor of Donald Trump at the moment. Many on social media already calling it a defeated look. But is it a carefully, in the political parlance, carefully curated image of what he should be looking like today that he's carrying forward? Is that a possibility?
Well, I'm sure he's been told to look serious and take this seriously. That's I have no doubt about that. But just to add to John's point, Donald Trump likes to be in control of things, but this is, for the first time, he is not in control of the story or the narrative. And to his point, the reason this is serious is not because of the actual hush money being paid, but because it was done to win an election, and because it was done in the interest, because it was done to lie to the American people. And so it was that greater significance that's why it's important. The other reason why he may be looking somewhat chastised is that this is going to be indicted, this is going to be entered into the history book. So when you read the story about Donald Trump, you are going to read about the 2 impeachments, the 2 acquittals, but you are also going to read about his indictment. And along with the indictment, every single child is going to read about him being linked to a porn star forever. The fact that he was indicted on the charges of hush money being paid to a porn star. And that is not something to be proud of. That shows a failure of moral character in the eyes of, a lot of people. So, along with, of course, the greater issue, which is lying to the American people, trying to cover up something in a campaign. So I just wanted to make that point.
A very important point that both of you have made here is with regards to this being a situation unprecedented even for Trump, considering these are criminal charges he's facing. As John was pointing out, he has had to go through the process of his fingerprints being taken. It's surreal, as Donald Trump has himself put it out, to be in all caps. He's used the word surreal. He's put it down in all caps. Clearly shows, perhaps, John, that reality has hit him, at least as of now?
I think that's very possible. Of course, it's difficult to get into Donald Trump's head. I don't know if it's a place many of us would want to get into, but yeah, he's going through an experience right now that very few men coming from the privilege and power that he does, and having held and that no other former president, none of the other 45 men who've been president of the United States has ever experienced. And it's really, although even the charge itself is not unprecedented. In fact, there was a Democratic candidate for president almost about 15 years ago who used campaign funds to make a payment to a mistress to basically purchase her silence. And he was charged for that, and he was tried for that. So
John,
it's not
can I just interrupt you for a second? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to point out to our viewers that this image that they can see on their television screens at the moment, this is a still picture, the first image of the former President Donald Trump sitting at the defense table with his defense team in a Manhattan court. This is the first image that has come from the arraignment that is underway at the moment. The indictment will be unsealed, and he will be made to know the charges, specific charges against him. The first image of Donald Trump inside the courtroom there, yet again, looking somber there, sitting with his defense team in the Manhattan court. The picture shows the former President Donald Trump flanked by his attorneys inside the Manhattan criminal court. This is just one image that has come through because news outlets have not been allowed to broadcast the arraignment. A judge ruled on Monday that 5 still photographs are going to be allowed, but nothing more. The proceedings will not be allowed to be broadcast. And as John was pointing out, these are fairly strict rules that specifically the Manhattan court follows. So, John, we are seeing this first image. I'm wondering if you have access to it, if you can see it. Just, help us understand what you make of the expressions of Donald Trump there.
I think it's more of what we saw in the hallway. Obviously, he knows that he's going to be on camera, so he's wearing his blue suit and his red tie, as he always does. But this is a serious moment. I've sat next to clients in both criminal and civil proceedings, and there's a seriousness and a somberness and a sense of gravity and consequence to sitting there in a courtroom. The judge is literally up above you and in front of you, surrounded by flags, surrounded by the seal of the court, all of these, trappings of formality. And it's a place that makes you feel very serious. It's a place that often when you step into a courtroom, you'll realize, wow, it's really quiet in here, because there's this somberness and sense of attention. And again, for all the thousands of civil lawsuits that Donald Trump has been involved in, for all the numerous times that he's had to sit under oath and be deposed and have a deposition taken of him in a civil case, he's never, that I know of in the past, sat there as a defendant in a criminal matter, facing, not only the judge and not only the seriousness of that courtroom environment, but the prospect of ending up in jail, of the fact that when you've got 30 felony counts against you, or whatever number it is that we learn in these next couple minutes, that you could very well spend time in jail if you're convicted of those counts. And that's a very, very serious moment for somebody like Donald Trump, and certainly for anybody his age.
Absolutely, and that is what he's undergoing at this moment. Donald Trump being arraigned in a New York courtroom after surrendering to authorities. He's in fact expected to plead not guilty, but this after the charges against him are read out. As has been reported, about 30 charges will be read out against Donald Trump in this specific case of hush money to an adult star. He's expected to plead after that not guilty, and but this still makes him the first former president in the history to face criminal charges, and that is why, as is being explained, this somber look on his face on a day when he himself describes it as surreal. Under arrest, taken to court, his fingerprints taken. We do not know at this moment whether his mugshot has been taken or not. On the right-hand side of your television screens, that is the corridor through which Donald Trump was taken just a short while back after the initial processes were over to appear before the judge. What news outlets are reporting from the US is normally these doors that are seen covered in black at the moment, they are not usually in fact blacked out the way they are today. This is another extra security measure that has been put in place today. Let me go back to my guests. Meenakshi Narula Ahmed is still with us. Meenakshi, anything that you would want to point out as you see these pictures emerge? Only still pictures from inside the courtroom, as 5 photographers have been allowed to take pictures inside.
Yes. I cannot even begin to tell you how unusual this is. This is psychologically an absolute first for Donald Trump. This is a man who is used to sitting in the presidential Oval Office, surrounded by flags, surrounded by the Secret Service and all the trappings of power, and exerting using that podium as a mouthpiece to say whatever he wanted and to intimidate people. And here he is, sitting down at that little table with his team, and above him is the judge, and the judge is the one surrounded by the flags and by the trappings of power. This is a major switch for someone like Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who flies in with his private plane and all his wealth and all his power and Secret Service, and now he's sitting in that courtroom. This is a man who's all about mind games. You cannot imagine what today has done to that man. And I think that, he's serious. He is probably very depressed. If you talk to Maggie Haberman or his bio, any of those people who follow him closely, they will tell you that, this is a man who's probably, this is a first for him. And I can tell you that he is not in a good place today. And he will find a way to he will find a way to get back. But right now he is feeling very, very depressed about this situation. Now, looking forward, it's hard to tell whether the other indictments are going to come down the pipeline. But if the other cases result in other indictments, and if he ends up facing multiple indictments in multiple cases, I actually am wondering whether that could exhaust the support of even his Republican voters. I mean, it'll be interesting to see.
John, many would argue that the case of the January 6th insurrection and the role that the former president allegedly played in allegedly inciting that violence is much graver than what we are seeing at the moment. Why has the same or similar yardstick not been applied in that case? What is the difference between the two?
Well, I think they're both equally serious in different ways, because both of them went to the fairness of our elections and the sanctity of our democracy. In this case, we're dealing with a deceit on the voters, spending his money to make sure voters didn't find something out that could have prevented him from getting into the presidency. And then when he was defeated again in 2020 by Joe Biden, again, as I said earlier in our broadcast, he has his supporters, and he pulls them together and points them like a weapon at the person or the institution that he feels he's up against. We're seeing that right now with the way that he's talking about the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, and putting out that image of Trump with a baseball bat getting ready to swing at the DA's head. But we saw it just as much back on January 6th, when he had a crowd of people and had spent months and months with the help of media networks, convincing those people that the election had been stolen and that he had truly been reelected, even though he lost by nearly 7 million votes. And he pulled them together in Washington, D.C. and pointed them at the Capitol. And that put Vice President Mike Pence's life in danger. It put the Speaker of the House life in danger. And it was the first time the U.S. Capitol was broken into and ransacked since the War of 1812 between the U.S. and the British.
All right, two sets of pictures now that we have with us. One is a still picture from inside the courtroom. The first image of Donald Trump as the processes are now underway. In fact, the first set of processes of his fingerprints being taken are over, and this is the arraignment that is underway at the moment. The still picture emerging from inside the courtroom. On the right-hand side of your television screens, live pictures of the corridor through which you just saw Donald Trump moving from one part to the other using this corridor. As we were pointing out, normally these glass panes are not blacked out, but today, as a part of an extra security measure, that has been done as well. Tina is now joining us live from outside the Manhattan court. Tina, what are the scenes outside at the moment, even as the arraignment is underway inside the courtroom?
Oh, it's just been crowds all day gathered here outside of the courtroom. Large crowds, both a combination of Trump protesters and onlookers, police. It's been nonstop activity outside the courtroom.
Can still see a lot of people around you. Are these supporters of Donald Trump expecting him to address them after he steps out, or they are just there to show their solidarity with him today?
They're here mainly to show their solidarity. Former U.S. President Trump will be speaking later this evening after he returns from New York to Florida. So there will be a rally at the Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. And so he will be making remarks there. Today, there were just protests and a lot of verbal sparring between the two camps of Trump supporters and anti-Trump demonstrators. So just a lot of activity, a bit of a circus really outside of the courtroom today.
Tina, we have seen Donald Trump wearing a very somber look. That picture that has been released from inside the courtroom, one still the first image coming through, and when we saw him moving through the corridor. But before entering the court, he did wave to people outside, did he?
Yes, he gave a quick wave to the crowds that had gathered outside before he slipped into the court building to be arraigned.
Tina, also, what do we know right now about what is happening inside the courtroom? Can you give us some details?
Well, it's standard procedure, really. He was booked. He was fingerprinted. It's not clear right now whether he had his mugshot taken. But then he had the charges formally read to him, and the indictment was unsealed. His defense attorneys had an opportunity to review the charges, and then he had the opportunity to plead guilty or not guilty.
And that arraignment is still underway at the moment. How long is it likely to take, Tina? Do we have an idea?
It should be wrapping up pretty quickly because DA Alvin Bragg is actually expected to make announcements to some remarks as well around 3:30 local time.
Which will be in about half an hour from now. Is he likely to address the media, Tina? And what is he expected to say?
That's correct. It's expected that he will just shed a little bit more light on what happened inside the courtroom. As you know, a lot of the press were prevented from going inside. There were no video recordings allowed. A little bit of still photography allowed, but fairly standard procedure. And really, I think it's what happens after today that will be interesting to see. Remember that no matter what, none of today's proceedings prevent Donald Trump from continuing to run for the 2024 election. And a lot of the support that showed up today is really about looking ahead, and his supporters were boisterous in their support of Donald Trump.
Tina, Alvin Bragg is the same person who has resurrected the case against Donald Trump, right? He has been under attack by the Republicans and by Donald Trump as well. What have they been saying for him?
They have been echoing sentiments that this is politically motivated, that this is a political witch hunt and, prosecution, abuse of power. And so all of this has been the same kind of sentiment that's been leading up to today, that it is incredibly politically motivated, that the charges are just bunk, and we'll see what happens. But he still has to comply with the formal arraignment proceedings, and he did surrender himself today.
Tina, after the arraignment is over, what are we expecting immediately for Donald Trump to fly to Florida?
Yes, he will return to Florida, and he will hold a rally where he'll make remarks to his supporters. And that will take place this evening at the Mar-a-Lago Resort in Florida.
All right, let me quickly point out to our viewers, and Tina is going to stay with us. some of the U.S. News outlets are now reporting that Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to 34 counts. So 34 charges, then specific charges, Tina, read out against Donald Trump in the arraignment?
That's correct. All charges were read out, and his lawyers had an opportunity to review those charges, and then he had to formally plead guilty or not guilty. All of this is standard procedure, again, for any citizen in New York who is indicted and has to go through the arraignment process.
All right, so there are some more pictures, images coming through from the courtroom. You can see in this picture, in fact, a better view of the courtroom at the moment as well. You can see Donald Trump sitting along with his team. You can see security personnel. I'm guessing, Tina, and you will have to weigh in here whether these are the Secret Service personnel who are there with Donald Trump today inside the courtroom, is it?
I wasn't in the courtroom myself, but I do know that he has a Secret Service detail. As a former U.S. president, he has a lifetime Secret Service detail protection. So it's very likely that they did accompany him. Again, all of the security for today really was a joint effort between Secret Service, U.S. Marshals, NYPD. Everybody is out in full force today, and there are a lot of street closures, a lot of metal barricades set up to direct traffic. It's been a ton of activity outside, just as much as there has been inside, but really outside is where you get so many people passing through, whether they're onlookers or protesters. It seems nobody can tear their eyes away.
All right, Tina, can you also quickly take us through some of the charges out of the 34 counts? Anything that you've picked up with regards to the proceedings inside the courtroom?
These charges really relate to falsifying business records, and so the key charge here is the one in regards to hush money payments that were allegedly made to porn star Stormy Daniels. Now, Trump has said that he did pay Michael Cohen, his former fixer, $130,000. He states that those were legal fees and not direct payment to Stormy Daniels, and the defense contends that.
All right, Tina May, thanks for joining us with those details. I hope we can get you back in some time from now, as I think the security there is preparing now for Donald Trump to, in fact, be leaving the courtroom, since he's already pleaded not guilty to the 34 counts. We will have those visuals, I believe, in some time from now. Let me go across to our guest who's joining us here as well now, Edward P. Joseph, from the Johns Hopkins University, foreign policy analyst, joining us from Washington, D.C. Edward Joseph, you know, just a short while back, sir, we were discussing the serious demeanor that Donald Trump is displaying today. He's pleaded not guilty to 34 counts. These are criminal charges. How serious is this really a situation for a person who has been in the highest office of the United States?
Good to be with you, Maha. I think we have to separate what this means for Donald Trump, what it means for the country, for the United States, and our legal system. So for Donald Trump, it's a couple of things. Politically, which is where his mind is first, not legally, but let's look at the political implications. These are positive in the immediate sense for Donald Trump, in the immediate sense. We have to understand this, that this is welcome. Donald Trump thrives on attention, thrives on controversy. His whole persona, his appeal, is that he is this guy who's battling it out for all those who are the, quote, establishment has ignored. So, and his characterization of this as a political persecution by this elite, or liberals. This all fits into that for him, fits into his narrative. And we have to remember he's struggling as a candidate. Your viewers have to understand his first competition is against Republicans, not against Joe Biden. He has to first win the Republican nomination. And what this does is this strengthens his hand. His opponents they're forced to come together in support of Trump. They're forced to attack the process and to say it's unfair, to say it's biased, because if they don't, they will alienate his supporters. So that's how it is today. That's at this moment. And now we have to understand that can change over time. There's developments in this case and developments in other cases that could change. But for the moment, politically, this is something that Donald Trump welcomes. He has this ability to show this posture of defiance that you talked about. Look at the expression on the face. That's defiant Donald Trump. Look at this with a picture of contempt for the proceedings. You see that right across his face. This is someone who himself is an actor in this sense. He's been on television. He was a reality star before he was president. So he knows how to appear and manipulate and use image and use words to his benefit. Legally, it's a different story. This is a legal proceeding, and nobody should kid themselves about that. This indictment has just been unsealed. His lawyers will fight this, but it's unless the judge unexpectedly agrees with the Trump defense team to dismiss the case, which is what the Trump team will do. Their first motion will be to dismiss the case. Unless the judge unexpectedly dismisses that, Donald Trump is in for a serious procedure here that will probably take a year, about a year, until it actually goes to trial. But there'll be a variety of steps that take place in our legal system in a trial like this, a criminal trial, that will take his time, and where he and his legal team, they'll be required to answer. They can make motions, they can make questions, they can raise things as well. But the events will not be in his control. Please.
Edward Joseph, there are two aspects here with regards to the judiciary, the U.S. judiciary, the legal system. One that is being keenly watched is how this matter is dealt with against a powerful person who's been a former president. But on the other hand, the Republicans, if they continue to target the other side, saying that this is weaponizing the judiciary against Donald Trump, he's being persecuted, that can be damaging for the judiciary as well, isn't it? Isn't this case a double-edged sword then?
Maha, you're 100% correct. There are risks here on both sides. The indictment has just been unsealed, and that means all of us, none of us really, have had a chance to read it yet, or just beginning that process. And I happen to be a lawyer, and there will be many lawyers, including some we should look to who have experience in these types of cases and experience in New York. We should look to them for their review of this and how strong they believe this indictment to be. Now, one of the questions going in is the charges here are, as it would appear from what I've heard about the indictment, which has just been unsealed, it's not that straightforward. In other words, we have two categories of crimes. We have lower significance ones we call misdemeanors and felonies. And also we have two different what we call sovereigns. There's two completely different levels of government. There's the state level and there's the federal level. These are two different sovereigns, and the law here, we have to see whether it pertains to state law or federal law, and how the prosecutor has linked those two legally there. So those are the questions, and they deserve some review and consideration. In terms of the judicial system, Maha, to answer your question, in some ways, the context here, which, again, as anticipated, it appears to be this based around this hush money payment. There's other cases that are ones that are of a less private nature, that involve charges of his trying to distort the election. For example, in the state of Georgia, to pressure the officials in Georgia to change the results. These type of cases are not personal. Those involve every American. They involve concerns of every American who wants to see a fair election. And there's also a criminal trial in a case involving an allegation of rape, which is one, of course, that's extremely serious, that any American of any thought would note that that's very serious. But the underlying crime here, if it's proven, of the hush money, the risk is, some people might not see this as terribly serious. Some people might see the crime itself as more of a private matter, even if it does, the bookkeeping and so forth, violate the law. And of course, no one is above the law. But contextually, crimes that involve changing and pressuring officials to change elections, a violent crime like the rape of a woman, as is alleged, these are inherently more serious crimes. Please. Or allegations of crimes.
Right. So the details that are coming through, and this is via the U.S. news outlets, Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty in the Manhattan court to 34 counts after hearing charges against him. These charges, of course, as we know, stem from the hush money case involving an adult star. Trump is the first former or present president to face criminal charges. The grand jury indictment was unsealed before Donald Trump, before the judge today, as he was presented before the judge rather. This after his fingerprints were taken. We're still not sure whether his mugshot was taken or not. He was under arrest for almost an hour, not handcuffed though, and brought into the courtroom later on to present himself before the judge, wearing a very serious, a somber demeanor, as we have been pointing out there, as Donald Trump was seen moving from, or rather through that corridor. The visuals there that you can see on your television screens at the moment on the right-hand side are those live images of that particular corridor through which Donald Trump was taken. There you have it. We are playing out those pictures that in fact emerged about an hour ago when he was being taken to the courtroom to appear before the judge. We still have with us John Bartlett as well as Meenakshi Narula Ahmed. We also have with us Edward Joseph, all here this morning in the US, late in the night here in India as we track this case very closely. John, coming to you now, in about some time from now, should we expect Donald Trump to be moving out of the courtroom because he's already pleaded not guilty to all the 34 counts?
That's probably correct. He should be leaving the courtroom once the proceedings wrap up. Again, I don't know whether the entire indictment is being read out or whether it's being read out in summary form. It's not clear how long exactly he'll be in there, but he'll emerge, and we'll see how his demeanor is then. Professor Joseph said a minute ago, in response to your question about the judiciary, just all the different ways in which lawyers are going to be part of this process. I will say that, for me as a lawyer, but also as a citizen and as a public official, the rule of law and the idea that when you step into a courtroom, you put politics aside has been very important to the legitimacy of the courts and how they work in the U.S. for more than 200 years. And in that regard, the 2000s have not been a very good century for the courts so far. They began with Bush versus Gore, back when I was in law school, and 5 Republican-appointed judges on the Supreme Court overruled 4 Democratic-appointed judges on the Supreme Court to make George W. Bush the President of the United States, through to the politicization of the judiciary that we saw under Trump, some of the anti-voting rights decisions that a 5-4 Republican majority on the Supreme Court put in place that made it possible for some of the rollbacks that are happening right now in voting rights across the U.S., and forward to even very, very recently with last year's decision regarding women's reproductive choice, making it possible for states in the U.S. again to ban abortion, and other decisions making it possible again for Christianity to be enforced in public schools in ways that for several generations that has not been the case because of the religious liberty clauses in the U.S. Constitution. So it's been a bad couple of years for the idea of the judiciary as a neutral space. And I hope that we get back to that. And unfortunately, right now, what we have is a criminal defendant who makes everything political and everything about himself and his political fortunes. Although, as Professor Joseph pointed out, today's going to be a good day for Donald Trump. He's going to raise a lot of money from his supporters online. And it's a good day, I think, from the standpoint of seeing that the rule of law still applies to you without regard to privilege or power. It's also teeing up a whole lot of rhetoric that we're going to hear out of the president and his supporters that are going to continue to undercut that idea that the court is where somebody can go without regard to their political position, without regard to their fortune, and find justice.
Meenakshi, I'll just come to you in a bit. We are reconnecting with Namrata Barar, who's joining us from outside the Manhattan court. Namrata, the indictment has been unsealed. 34 counts to which Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty?
Bang on line with expectations. We were expecting more than 30 counts, and those were the reports that the media had earlier spoken about. It is on the same lines, and Donald Trump expectedly going ahead and pleading not guilty. We are still awaiting for any other kind of statement coming through. So far, we haven't heard anything from his office or him, but we have heard reports from the White House when President Biden has been asked whether or not he's going to be watching this. He said he'll catch it on the news, but he's got other things to do, and this is not an official priority at this moment. So it's interesting the kind of messaging coming from White House right now to downplay this momentous occasion, because in many ways, for both Democrats and Republicans, it is a momentous time. On one side, we've spoken about Republicans saying this weaponizes the legal system and opens the Pandora's box for many more cases in the years to come on the other side of the political platforms as well. And on the other hand, we have Democrats who are saying this country holds no one above law, and justice has finally prevailed, and even the former U.S. president is answerable to the same laws of justice that any ordinary American citizen is.
So, Namrata, what are we expecting now? How long before Donald Trump is expected to step out?
It should be fairly shortly. It is quite a quick process because, remember, right now, there is no debate about the charges. This is merely a list of the charges, the felonies, the 34 counts of felonies that Justice Juan Merchant is going to be reading out to Donald Trump. And after the plea, bail plea is set out, and he is free to go, which he is planning to go back to Mar-a-Lago in Florida this evening itself to address again a televised press conference along with 500 of his supporters meeting there. So that's how it's going to play out, which is unusual in the sense that the entire criminal court building has been closed only for this case, but is also typical of the justice and law and order procedure that usually accompanies criminal cases here in Manhattan.
Namrata, also, you said Donald Trump, of course, will be addressing, as has been reported, once he reaches Florida, he'll be addressing his supporters. No clarity, though, on whether he's likely to make a statement or two to his supporters in or rather outside the Manhattan court as well, is it?
There is no clarity. As we were discussing earlier, there are no rules when it comes to Donald Trump. So yes, you could get a surprise announcement, but it is unlikely in the sense that his conduct here, from the pictures that we see, the visuals of Donald Trump looking very serious in court, has been orchestrated. They do want to control his messaging at a time like this. This, even though we are saying, could well mean a resurrection of his political career, his 2024 run for elections could well change completely in his favor based on what we are witnessing today. However, his team does want him to stay calm, not resort to what are known as the typical Donald Trump antics or behavior. So there is a bit of back and forth which is going possibly between Donald Trump, the man, and the former president, and Donald Trump's legal team.
All right, Namrata, thanks for joining us with those details. We'll be coming back to you in just a bit as we get those pictures of Donald Trump leaving the Manhattan court. Let me go across to one of Donald Trump's supporters, Anand Ahuja, who's joining us here on the broadcast as well. Anand Ahuja, much is being said about the demeanor of Donald Trump today, looking somber there as he's pleaded not guilty to 34 counts that are being read out at the moment. His supporters within the Republican Party, otherwise as well, some of them being seen outside the Manhattan court today as well. Are they expecting him to address them today?
I believe that he is going to make a statement, just one or two sentences when he comes out from the courtroom. But in the evening, when he reaches back to Florida around 5:30 p.m. or so.
Okay, all right. Anand Ahuja, I'll have to interrupt you there. The arraignment is over. The charges have been read out. Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty and he's just left the courtroom. You just saw those pictures there that came in. This is the same corridor through which he went to present himself before the judge. He has just left from that same corridor. Anand Ahuja, you were saying that he's likely to make a statement or two. Is that still possible?
That's what I understand, that he will just make a statement of one or two sentences when he comes out of the courtroom. And then in the evening when he reaches Florida, then at around 5:30 p.m. or so, then he's going to have a press conference, or he's going to make a more elaborate and much bigger speech at that time. So that's what is likely to happen now.
And Anand Ahuja, what are you all expecting to hear from Donald Trump? The same points that you laid out earlier, that this is a witch hunt against Donald Trump. Is he likely to underline that once again, or are you all expecting him to say anything different?
At this particular moment, when he comes out of the court, I don't think that he is going to elaborate on any other issues than saying that he's not guilty. And I don't know whether he will say witch hunt or not. Knowing Donald Trump, I believe that he may say that it's a political persecution. It's totally un-American and gross misuse of a system. But other than that, he's not going to say anything right now. Let's see what he says in the evening. In the evening when he goes home, as I said earlier, that it will be a lengthy speech, and he's going to repeat the same statements which he has been saying so far, ever since a hint was given that he's going to be indicted by the district attorney in New York.
All right, Anand Ahuja, just stay on with us. Let me quickly point out to our viewers that these are fresh pictures, live pictures that are coming in right now. Aerial view in which you can see 4 vehicles that are being prepared now outside the Manhattan court. We are expecting Donald Trump to step out any time now from the court, and then he will be headed out. He's expected to fly to Florida and make an elaborate statement there in Florida tonight in the US, early Wednesday morning for India. So we can see the cavalcade has started moving, so which clearly shows Donald Trump has already left from the courtroom, although we didn't get a very clear image there of Donald Trump. We'll try to see whether any of the cameras did in fact manage to get a glimpse of Donald Trump stepping out of the court. We did get a glimpse of him while he was entering the court. He had waved to a very, a short, just a couple of seconds there that it took for him to wave and then enter the court. However, while he's stepping out, no clear image there of Donald Trump. But since the cars are moving and this aerial view there is clearly showing the cavalcade moving, it appears that he's now headed out. So Anand Ahuja, he really hasn't made any address. Were we expecting him to make those couple of short statements right outside the courtroom, and that hasn't happened? So now the only statement expected is in Florida, Anand Ahuja?
That was my understanding, but in a way it's good that he has not made any statement when he came out of the court.
And why do you say that?
Because at this particular moment, immediately coming out of the court, making any statement as an attorney, I personally believe is not a good strategy. It may be taken. Let's say if he says I pleaded not guilty, that in any case media knows it. In any case, people outside, they know it. And I personally believe that he was persuaded by his attorneys not to make any statement when he comes out of the court, because there is a possibility that if he makes any statement which may be unpleasant and may not be liked by the judges, law enforcement authorities, that may not misfire. So I believe in a way it's a good strategy. When he came out of the court, he didn't make any statement.
And what do we know from here on, Anand Ahuja? If you could shed some light, is he headed directly to Florida now, or are we expecting him to go back to Trump Tower? Any details that you can share with us at this juncture? And also, what are the supporters? What is going on in the minds of the supporters? What, as I was asking you earlier, do they expect him to say when he makes that address in Florida? Do you once again expect him to lay out his political strategy from here on, despite the fact that he is now the first former president ever to face criminal charges?
So basically, from the procedure point of view, normally what happens when these charges are read out in the court and the defendant pleads guilty or not guilty, most of the cases defendant will plead not guilty. Then the defendant's attorney gets within 15 days, district attorney is to provide all those documents, all those, whether any conversation, any video recording, any paper document to the defense attorneys. It's known as discovery proceedings. So within 15 days, district attorney has to provide all that material to defense attorney, on the basis of which these charges were framed by the district attorney. Including grand jury proceedings, what was discussed there. So, and after that, defense attorneys, they get 45 days to file a motion. It's known as pre-trial motion to dismiss. Chances are that in these kind of circumstances, that motion will be granted by the judge. But considering if it becomes too political issue and judge decides not to grant that particular motion, then there is a possibility of another motion that defense attorneys can file, that is motion based on statute of limitation, because these charges have been brought against Donald Trump much beyond the period prescribed in the statute. So statute of limitation may be an issue. But there is another motion which is known as Clayton motion, and under Clayton motion, that even if, for argument's sake, a person has committed a crime, but in the interest of the in the larger interest of the justice, so that the situation may not become out of control, and country may not be divided between two parties, Democrats versus Republicans, and it may not take an ugly shape. Under Clayton motion, the idea is that even if one has committed a crime, the charges are dismissed in the larger interest of the society. So there are so many, but even if the arguments say that if the case goes forward and none of the motions are granted, then this case will take at least 2 years for the New York court to decide.
That's right.
And even if Donald Trump loses this case, then appeals will be filed, and then even if appeals are defeated, then he may go to the Court of Appeals. Even if Court of Appeals he loses the case, then it may go to Circuit Court, and even if in Circuit Court he loses the case, then it will go to Supreme Court. So the whole process, by the time he will be declared guilty or convicted, it may take at least 4 or 5 years.
All right. Thanks for giving us that clarity. However, let me quickly connect with Tina as well, who's joining us from outside the Manhattan court. Tina, Donald Trump has just left the courtroom. What do we know from here on? What is he likely to do?
Yes, he will eventually be returning to Florida, where he has a rally planned, and it will be speaking to his supporters in Florida at his Mar-a-Lago resort.
And all those people right behind you, I mean, a lot of media personnel there, but as you were pointing out earlier, a crowd of Trump supporters, a crowd of anti-Trump crowd gathered there. Has that dissipated, or they are still hanging around?
It's finally started to feel like it's dissipate a little bit here, and so things have calmed down a little bit. There's still a number of anti-Trump supporters who are getting started again, and so no idea yet as to how long they'll go for, but it's definitely a scene out here outside the courtroom, and it doesn't look as if it's going to die out completely. It just feels like a constant stream of people coming through.
Tina, take us through the details that you've picked up from what happened inside the courtroom just a short while back.
Yeah, based on the reports I'm reading, it seemed like a fairly straightforward process. The indictment was unsealed. He pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts. His defense lawyers had an opportunity to review the charges, and at this point, they are going to return to Florida, and they're going to prepare his defense.
And were his supporters who were outside the Manhattan court behind you, any of them, were they expecting him to make a statement or two? Because there was some amount of expectation that he might just say a few words.
Yeah, as it turns out, today was just so insane with the crowds that ended up gathering out here. Police were told to expect a crowd of nearly 2,000, and it's safe to say it came very, very close to that number. So just the sheer amount of media outlets, media throngs, journalists, onlookers, people passing through, supporters, protesters, anybody and everybody was out here. It was a circus. Security was tight, and it made it incredibly hard to get around. So it finally is starting to die down a tiny little bit, but there's still a number of people gathered out here.
And Tina, when Donald Trump was entering the court today, we saw him waving to those outside, but as he left the court, we hardly were able to even see a glimpse of Donald Trump. The cars were neatly lined up outside the courtroom, and he was immediately taken away.
Yeah, security again super tight regarding this former U.S. president. I mean, such an unprecedented event today that took place, and we'll definitely hear more as the evening unfolds. We'll hear from both him and DA Alvin Bragg, and you know, just expect in the coming months a lot of voices.
All right, Tina, when what exactly is the time possibly that we can expect Donald Trump to make that statement in Florida?
It has not been announced yet. I would anticipate, you know, a couple of hours after he lands in Florida. You know, again, none of what happens today prevents Donald Trump from continuing to run for re-election, continuing to run for the 2024 presidential campaign. And so really what will be interesting to see is will the events of today bolster support for him, or will it be his downfall? That remains to be seen, but he's definitely going to be speaking up and using it as an opportunity to connect with voters.
All right. In fact, Tina, let me quickly read out this tweet that has been put out by Alvin Bragg. We just announced 34-count felony indictment of former President Donald J. Trump, is what it says. This is what has been put out by Alvin Bragg. Manhattan is home to the country's most significant business market. We cannot allow New York businesses to manipulate their records to cover up criminal conduct. As this office has done time and again, we today uphold our solemn responsibility to ensure everyone stands equal before the law. That really, Tina, would you say it has been a point of discussion as to how the judiciary deals with this case?
Yeah, they plan to treat it as any other business fraud case, and you're talking about somebody who, before he was president, really fashioned himself as a business and real estate mogul in New York City, presumably having to comply by the same rules and regulations that any business person does. And so this is the same situation. He will be following the same standard procedures.
All right, Tina May, thanks for joining us with all those details from outside the Manhattan court where Donald Trump arraignment has just got over. He has now left the court, probably headed to Florida now, where he will be making a statement later on. In fact, some of the news outlets, and I'd like to go across to our guests who are joining us on this show now. Edward, I want to come to you on that. There are some news outlets that are reporting that Donald Trump has been warned in the courtroom today that he should not be making any statements that could likely incite violence. Now, do we connect this to January 6th insurrection? Is there trepidation? Are people just being wary of any such situation again?
There's no doubt about it that we have to be, when we approach this case and when we approach Donald Trump, we have to be apprehensive. We have to be very concerned. This is a extremely selfish and reckless individual. I mean, I don't think I'm stating anything that isn't a fact. And he, we saw his conduct on January 6th of 2021. It was a disgrace, what he did to incite that. There's many Republicans have said that. Some of them have since changed their story, but they certainly stated that at the time. And he was impeached for that. So, and there were Republicans who voted for that impeachment of Donald Trump. There were some. So this is a reckless, dangerous, selfish individual, and if he can mobilize public support in that way, in a reckless and dangerous way. And if he thinks it will serve his interest, he will do it. And we should have no illusion about that. The question is, would it serve his interest? And he has to be very careful now, because things have changed after January 6th. There's been these extensive hearings in the House of Representatives about it. This has been documented, and the attempts by Republicans and some news outlets to try to rewrite the story and convince people that these were just peaceful protests has failed completely. Americans are not fooled by that, and none of them are buying that. So Donald Trump has to be very careful here. Violence would not suit his, in my opinion, would not suit his interest. It would be proof of just how dangerous and reckless a character he is. Now, that's at the time being. But he may choose at a later time. Let's say he were convicted. He may yet try to pull that, or the threat of that, in some ways, again, if he thinks it can serve his interest. Let me also come to the point, the very good point of the preceding guest, Mr. Bartlett, that he's absolutely right there about the fact that the U.S. judicial system is also under scrutiny here. And there's always a question of fairness, and that both, as you put it, Maha, very well, that whether the principle that no one is above the law, but also that everyone is equal under the law. That, in other words, just because you're famous and Republican, even as a menace, that you don't have politically motivated prosecution. At the same time, when you violate the law, you don't get favors because you're famous and get easy treatment. And that is what's critical here. And that's where this New York prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, and the judge himself march on. The way they conduct themselves here will be very important to show the American people, to show the world that this is about justice. This is not about politically motivated prosecution. This is about the law, about the requirements under the law, about how you record expenses. But we should understand here that the prosecution has in some ways, we don't know all of it, but has a difficult task, because the nature of the payment, this alleged payment to the former porn star there, Stormy Daniels, it depends under the law what the motive is, whether the motive was campaign related, and it did take place allegedly just before the election. So there certainly was a motive, if this took place, for Donald Trump to do this for campaign purposes, to avoid negative impact on his election prospects. But that prosecution has the burden to prove that. Now, they again, for your viewers to understand, we had a grand jury process where the prosecutor brought in witnesses before these citizens of New York, but they were not cross-examined. That's not our process. But those citizens of New York were presented with different witnesses who gave testimony under the guidance of the prosecutor, and they presumably told this grand jury, they said, yes, I made this payment, presumably in the case of one of the witnesses. Yes, that witness stated that he made these payments, and then stated apparently how they were recorded. And this was testimony that established, so we would understand the illegality of the conduct. But that has to be proven now in a court, and this is different from the grand jury. This is one where Donald Trump will have his own lawyers who will be challenging the witnesses and challenging the evidence and putting forward their own evidence. Please.
All right. Let me also bring in Puneet Ahluwalia. He's a Republican who's joining us here on the show as well. Puneet, 34 counts is what Donald Trump has been charged with, felony, and he's pleaded not guilty. Today, do you think that these charges against him, criminal charges against him, are going to prove to be damaging only for Donald Trump? Or do you believe that, as Donald Trump says, this is a witch hunt and he can use this politically in the run-up to 2024 presidential election?
I think this is damaging for our country, for things we believe in. It's a foundational shift in the woke culture that we live in now, that if we do not agree with you, we'll find every means, even judiciary, to go after you and weaponize the judiciary to target you. And it's a sad day and it's a disappointing day. And I'm not saying just because I'm a Republican, I'm saying as an American citizen, because this is what the American public is tired of, is the divisiveness that exists in both parties. We need someone who can be a unifier. And again, mind you, I agree with the rule of law. I believe that if you have done a crime, you should pay for it. But at the same time, we've also seen these incidents with President Bill Clinton. He lied. And then we've seen this with Hillary. And then we have an ongoing investigation on Hunter Biden. So, you know, nobody's above the law, but this is going to give every Commonwealth attorney or a public prosecutor who wants to go out and make a name and is going to basically do a witch hunt. And mind you, this prosecutor also ran his election that if he gets elected, he's going to find ways to prosecute Trump. So I feel it's a very disappointing day in our republic. What we need to do is we need to rise above this divisiveness that exists in our country, and we have to find ways to serve the people. And first important thing is that the crime is on the rise. We have issues on education. We have a war going in Ukraine. We have a lot of, we have China and Russia looking to undermine our economy and our currency. There are far more serious issues to be done, and especially for this prosecutor, make New York safe and serve the people of New York, rather than going in after a president who, again, is leading in the polls. And their goal, again, is to incite and excite President Trump's base. So this way he does get the nomination, who eventually will lose in the presidential election because he's the best hope for the Democrats. And the reason why I say that is because all the candidates who were supported by President Trump in last election cycle, they lost, except for one. And that's the reason their choice is to create this circus, this political stunt, to have the public of the United States get away from the issues which are facing our country, which is inflation and the cost of goods going up, failed presidency of President Biden. This is a sad day for our nation. And again, at the same time, it makes a mockery of our country and our judiciary in the entire rest of the world.
But Puneet, you know, many would disagree that this is not equally serious, if not more, than all the other issues you've laid out, because the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, has tweeted saying Manhattan is home to the country's most significant business market. We cannot allow New York businesses to manipulate their records to cover up criminal conduct. This is not a civil case. This is a criminal case against Donald Trump. And therefore, the other side argues that it is just as serious.
Well, there are statute of limitation. There are so many other things which I can quote from the perspective as what I've been reading. Not that I'm a legal expert, but what I'm saying to you is, Mr. Bragg can brag, but what's important is ask the residents of New York, ask the residents or the shopkeepers and the business people of New York, do they feel safe, or were they safer before Prosecutor Bragg came in? So I think there are far more serious fishes to go after, serious ways to make the community safer, the businesses safer. I think this is more of a stunt, a political drama, a circus which has been going on. I think it's a disappointing day. That's my opinion. All right,
Meenakshi, I want to come to you as well, because more than the direct support for Donald Trump, we are seeing Republicans attack Alvin Bragg, use the term weaponizing of judiciary. Is that going to be the narrative going forward?
Well, Joe Manchin has made a statement that a lot of Republicans have seem to have latched on to, which is no one should be above the law, but no one should be persecuted by the law without reason. So I think that that seems like a fairly fair statement to have made. I think the US Constitution is pretty clear, and I think John said it very well, that I think this is a real test for the country, that no one, not even the president, should be above the law. And I think if indeed the president has committed a crime, and this is a criminal case, then he needs to, people need to see that he needs to have his day in court, that he needs to be treated like anyone else. So I think we should see what. Let's wait and see. I think we shouldn't all be jumping to conclusions. The judge has just read out the charges. Let's see where the courts take us. If he is not guilty, then the courts will decide that.
All right. In just a short while from now, we are expecting the District Attorney Alvin Bragg to, in fact, make some press statement as well. We are just waiting for that to happen as well. We'll take a very quick break at this juncture, and we'll be back with more. Stay with us.
Deeply polarized world where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse. We take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right and center with me, Vishnu Shom, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
20 years since we started, this music has been with you. Now, we want you to share your version of it. Let your inner artists out by creating an incredible remix of the NDTV signature track. Log on to ndtv.com/best of NDTV. Get inspired and submit your rendition. One winner gets an all-expense paid holiday for two. NDTV 24/7 20th year celebration.
This is NDTV. No noise, no shouting, and most importantly, no lies. Our lead story tonight. Big international story. India is closely watching it. News that informs and inspires.
The news with Sonia Singh. Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. only on NDTV 24/7.
The only side we're on is yours.
One winner gets an all-expense paid holiday for two. To the luxurious.
Debates are essential not just for journalists.
Rhetoric, so what I said before was we can't, literally, we can't tell you what we've discussed with
No,
our
I
clients.
understand,
So
but are you
that's the answer.
concerned that he's continuing to go after the judge, talking about the judge's wife, talking about the family? I mean, are you?
I don't think the judge was concerned about it.
Yeah, but any other defendant, wouldn't you be like?
Any other defendant wouldn't be here today.
He's not going after the judge. He is not going after the judge. He commented that he thought that there were some issues that may cause a conflict. That's not going after the judge. He is not threatening the judge. He is not going after the judge.
Right, he's going after the DA.
He has said that the DA, he is angry because the DA has brought a case that is unjustified. And so I'm not going to comment on it. You may disagree with the way he spoke.
Can you talk about the process? Was he fingerprinted? Was there a mugshot? Was there a mugshot?
I think, thank you.
What about
fingerprints?
Thank you.
That is Donald Trump's defense team that is speaking to the media. They're the media asking them several questions about why he's been targeting the judge. His team outrightly denying that charge, saying that this is not the attempt to attack the judge. His defense team, they're speaking with the media outside, even though Donald Trump as was expected earlier by some of his supporters, that he might make a statement or two. That did not happen. He was immediately taken away after he left the courtroom, immediately stepping out of the court and leaving from the premises there. This perhaps, as is being reported, he was advised to do that and not speak to the media immediately after in New York, outside the court rather, and to finally make his statement once he reaches Florida, which has been decided earlier on. But his defense team just spoke there and were in fact defending him on the account, as several journalists there asked them about how the judiciary, the judge and others are being targeted and attacked in this case.
In a deep...
Cross the distance between darkness and vision. Teach a generation that has lost all hope. Treat a patient from thousands of miles away. None of this was possible
till technology stepped in and made it possible. A selection of the finest stories from across the country where technology comes with a human touch.
Unleash your dreams with Snapdragon in collaboration with NDTV. Only on the NDTV network.
Years since we started, this music has been with you, playing in your homes, at work, and in your car. Now, we want you to share your version of it. Calling all music buffs from across India to let your inner artists out by creating an incredible remix of the NDTV signature track for the world to hear. Log on to ndtv.com/bestofndtv to access the original track. Get inspired and submit your rendition. One winner gets an all-expense-paid holiday for two to the luxurious Alila Fort, Bishangarh, Rajasthan. NDTV 24/7. 20th year celebrations.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with all your tech needs.
Gadget 360, Gadget Love. Gadgets 360, Gadgets Love.
You too can get some gadget love with buying guides, expert reviews, and all the latest news on Gadgets 360.
Debates are essential not just for journalism but for humanity. It ignites our mind, opens it up for counter-opinion. To hear all views, opinion of all hues. Which is why the oldest running debate show on Indian news television is not 23 years old, but young at 23.
इस इनिशिएटिव को मैं अभिनंदन करता हूं कि सच को सच के रूप में पेश करने का उन्होंने साहस.
Former US President Donald Trump pleads not guilty on 34 felony counts. He's the first former president or president ever to face criminal charges. Invented names won't change reality on ground. India lashes out at China. India responds to China renaming 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh. India responds to OIC on Ram Navami violent statement. Anti-India agenda at play in OIC is what the statement from India reads. NDTV's explosive Siddaramaiah interview fallout. Rahul Gandhi tells top Congress leaders set differences aside. 7 killed in Sikkim's Nathula Pass avalanche. Hectic rescue operations on, halted after sundown to resume tomorrow. Ukraine war fallout. Finland joins NATO. NATO border with Russia doubles. First up, the Trump trial from the Trump Tower to Manhattan court and finally leaving the court after pleading not guilty to 34 felony counts. Trump was under arrest but not handcuffed when he was taken inside the court today. In fact, Trump was presented before the judge after which the indictment was unsealed and all the 34 charges against him were read out, after which he pleaded not guilty, immediately left the court, did not speak to supporters who were, some of who were outside the Manhattan court. He's expected to make a statement this morning in Florida. In fact, the pictures that had come in earlier had shown Donald Trump immediately leaving the court after the arraignment, and these are fresh pictures of Donald Trump now leaving for Florida. Voice of America's Tina is now joining us with more details. So Tina, we are finally expecting that statement coming in from Donald Trump only once he is in Florida. Is that right?
That's correct. He'll be speaking at a rally to supporters on his Mar-a-Lago resort. And so we'll be speaking to a crowd of supporters there, and we'll finally be able to learn more about what was going through his head during these proceedings. Otherwise, the proceedings, as I understand it, were fairly straightforward and by the book. And so we'll learn more tonight.
What are his supporters expecting to hear from him today? Because we've already heard words like witch hunt, persecution, weaponizing of judiciary, all that being used already by the Republicans.
Yeah, honestly, I anticipate that it will be a lot more of the same. This is the kind of sentiment and rhetoric that has been expressed from the beginning, and it's unlikely that today's proceeding changes very much of that. I think, in fact, that it will bolster support among his supporters. Remember that no matter what you take from today, none of today's proceedings prevent Donald Trump from continuing to campaign for re-election in the 2024 presidential re-election. So it's likely that he will use events from today to reiterate this was a witch hunt, that this was political persecution.
Also, Tina, do we have any details of the next date of hearing? Some media outlets are reporting that it's likely to be now in December. That's almost after more than half the year has gone by.
Yeah, you know, these things take time. If we look back at precedent, the same judge who is ruling on this case is the same one who convicted former Trump Organization CFO Alvin Bragg, and that was a fraud case from last year. And from the time that the indictment against the Trump Organization was officially announced to the time that the case actually went to trial was a period of 16 months. So this is going to take some time.
So we are expecting this to be a long drawn process, and then it does not stop in any way Donald Trump from being the Republican candidate for the 2024 presidential election, right?
It has not. It has not stopped him from running. I think it will continue. Will give him even more motivation to call the whole thing a witch hunt. And I expect a lot of fiery rhetoric at tonight's rally.
Also, Tina, very quickly, if you can take us through what happened today while he was in court. His fingerprints were taken, but do we know anything about whether his mugshot was taken? Because there was a lot of contradictory information about that. Is there any clarity now?
I'm still waiting on that clarity myself. Reports seem to indicate that perhaps it may not have actually been taken because he is a very public figure. We all know what he looks like. And security concerns around whether or not that mugshot would be leaked. And so we are still kind of waiting to determine that at this point.
All right. Tina, many thanks for joining us with all those details from Manhattan. Let's quickly now listen in to Donald Trump's defense team.
What about the change of venue? Just answer this question about the change of venue. There's a lot of...
It's premature.
Right.
Premature.
Right. So why is he talking about that? And why is he trying to move this to a place like Staten Island?
Once again, we're three lawyers here to litigate and fight this case. We're not PR consultants. We're not social media consultants. Donald Trump has made one hell of a brand and became president of the United States with his social media and posts and everything else, his messages. We are here to talk about the case and litigate cases. We can't address what he posts or what he wants to post or did post.
But as his attorneys, have you told him to stop posting this rhetoric,
So
these
what I
messages
said
about
before
the judge?
was we can't, literally, we can't tell you what we've discussed with
No,
our
I
client.
understand,
So
but are
that's
you
the answer.
concerned that he's continuing to
Not
go
concerned
after
at
the
all.
judge, talking about the judge's wife, talking about the family? I mean, are you?
I don't think the judge was concerned about it.
Yeah, but any other defendant, wouldn't you be like?
Any other defendant wouldn't be here today.
All right, these are the people on the defense team of Donald Trump there who were addressing the media asking several questions there on the social media messaging of Donald Trump. Also, the manner in which the judiciary, the judge have been attacked as well, responding to all those questions there. We're taking a very quick break now. We'll be back with more. Stay with us.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right, and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right, and center with me, Vishnu Shom, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
20 years since we started, this music has been with you. Now, we want you to share your version of it. Let your inner artists out by creating an incredible remix of the NDTV signature track. Log on to ndtv.com/best of NDTV. Get inspired and submit your rendition. One winner gets an all-expense paid holiday for two. NDTV 24/7 20th year celebration.
This is NDTV. No noise, no shouting, and most importantly, no lies. Our lead story tonight. Big international story. India is closely watching it. News that informs and inspires.
The news with Sonia Singh, Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. only on NDTV 24/7.
The only side we're on is yours.
Cross the distance between darkness and vision. Teach a generation that has lost all hope. Treat a patient from thousands of miles away. None of this was possible
till technology stepped in and made it possible. A selection of the finest stories from across the country where technology comes with a human touch.
Unleash your dreams with Snapdragon in collaboration with NDTV. Only on the NDTV network.
Years since we started, this music has been with you, playing in your homes, at work, and in your car. Now, we want you to share your version of it. Calling all music buffs from across India to let your inner artists out by creating an incredible remix of the NDTV signature track for the world to hear. Log on to ndtv.com/best of NDTV to access the original track. Get inspired and submit your rendition. One winner gets an all-expense paid holiday for two to the luxurious Alila Fort, Bishangarh, Rajasthan. NDTV 24/7 20th year celebrations.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with
Welcome back. Even after Mamata Banerjee's warning to the administration to remain alert for the next few days and huge police presence in Rishra area, a flare-up happened on Tuesday night at a railway level crossing, held up trains for 3 hours till the situation was brought under control. The Bengal governor visited the area on a fact-finding mission.
West Bengal Governor C.V. Ananda Bose in the Hooghly district, where violence flared up for the second straight day on Monday, after stone pelting near a railway crossing last night in the Rishra town, led to the suspension of train services on a crucial rail route for about 3 hours.
8 बजे हुआ झमेला उधर रेलवे लाइन के साइड में हम लोग घर में आकर के अपना लॉक को आवाज बम का आवाज आ रहा था तो हम लोग घर में आकर के और अपना ये लॉक को करके ये तीन दरवाजे हैं मेरे तीनों को लॉक करके हम लोग भीतर में बैठ गए विद फैमिली सब एक जगह हो गए.
The districts of Hooghly and Havra near Kolkata have been on the boil after clashes broke out during Ram Navami rallies. Hours after Monday's fresh violence, Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee said these were not communal clashes but criminal acts by goons allegedly hired by the BJP.
It's a criminal violence. এটা হচ্ছে ক্রিমিনালদের নিয়ে ভায়োলেন্স করা. যে ছেলেটার ছবি আপনারা টিভিতে দেখেছেন বন্দুক নিয়ে নৃত্য করছে রামনবমীর মিছিলে, রামচন্দ্র কি তাকে কানে কানে বলেছিল যে আমার কথা তোমরা বন্দুক নিয়ে মিছিল করো?
तो ममता बनर्जी कम्युनल जो सेंसिटिवनेस क्रिएट कर रही है, कम्युनल सिचुएशन क्रिएट कर रही है, ये ममता बनर्जी का काम है.
Amidst simmering tensions and heavy police deployment, an uneasy calm prevails in Rishra, and with a warning from the Chief Minister that there could be more trouble in sensitive areas, the police are keeping vigil and are on alert to ensure there are no more flare-ups. With camera person G.D. Shankar in Rishra, Saurabh Gupta, NDTV.
Let's turn our attention back to the United States. The Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is addressing the media. Listen in.
Afternoon, Donald Trump was arraigned on a New York Supreme Court indictment returned by a Manhattan grand jury on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct. The defendant repeatedly made false statements on New York business records. He also caused others to make false statements. The defendant claimed that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. This simply was not true. And it was a false statement that the defendant made month after month in 2017. April, May, June, and so on through the rest of the year. For 9 straight months, the defendant held documents in his hand containing this key lie, that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. And he personally signed checks for payments to Michael Cohen for each of these 9 months. In total, the grand jury found there were 34 documents with this critical false statement. Why did Donald Trump repeatedly make these false statements? The evidence will show that he did so to cover up crimes relating to the 2016 election. Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015 to a catch-and-kill scheme. That is, a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election. As part of this scheme, Donald Trump and others made 3 payments to people who claimed to have negative information about Mr. Trump. To make these payments, they set up shell companies, and they made yet more false statements, including, for example, in AMI, American Media Incorporated's business records. One of the 3 people that they paid to keep quiet was a woman named Stormy Daniels. Less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, Michael Cohen wired $130,000 to Stormy Daniels' lawyer. That payment was to hide damaging information from the voting public. The participant scheme was illegal. The scheme violated New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. The $130,000 wire payment exceeded the federal campaign contribution cap, and the false statements in AMI's books violated New York law. That is why Mr. Trump made false statements about his payments to Mr. Cohen. He cannot simply say that the payments were a reimbursement for Mr. Cohen's payments to Stormy Daniels. To do so, to make that true statement, would have been to admit a crime. So instead, Mr. Trump said that he was paying Mr. Cohen for fictitious legal services in 2017 to cover up actual crime committed the prior year. And in order to get Michael Cohen his money back, they planned one last false statement. In order to complete the scheme, they planned to mischaracterize the payments to Mr. Cohen as income to the New York State tax authorities. The conduct I just described, and that which was charged by the grand jury, is felony criminal conduct in New York State. True and accurate business records are important everywhere, to be sure. They are all the more important in Manhattan, the financial center of the world. That is why we have a history in the Manhattan DA's office of vigorously enforcing white-collar crime. My office, including the talented prosecutors you saw at Arraignment earlier today, has charged hundreds of felony falsifying business records. This charge can be said is the bread and butter of our white-collar work. And fraud presents itself in all different forms here in Manhattan. We have charged falsifying business records for those who violated federal bank secrecy laws. We have charged falsifying business records for those who were seeking to cover up sex crimes. And we have brought this charge for those who committed tax violations. At its core, this case today is one with allegations like so many of our white-collar cases. Allegations that someone lied again and again to protect their interests and evade the laws to which we are all held accountable. As this office has done time and time again, we today uphold our solemn responsibility to ensure that everyone stands equal before the law. No amount of money and no amount of power changes that enduring American principle. I'll now take questions.
Excuse me, so we're going to take a limited number for follow-up questions, one question per reporter. I will call on you, and again, we have limited time. Thank you. The first question will be Brett.
Bragg, thank you. Richard West of CNN. Why now? I mean, some argue that this is a political move. You're not going to be a political person. The court case are going to go into the next, political season. Why now?
We conducted a thorough and rigorous investigation, as we're known to do, at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I've been doing this for 24 years and am no stranger to rigorous, complex investigations. I bring cases when they're ready. Having now conducted a rigorous, thorough investigation, the case was ready to be brought, and it was brought.
Mr. Bragg, the indictment says that there were 34 false business records. And they were done to conceal another crime, but indictment does not specifically say what those crimes were. We are assuming, perhaps, that they might be election-related. I'm wondering if you can specify what laws were also broken.
Sure. So let me say as an initial matter that the indictment doesn't specify that because the law does not so require. In my remarks, I mentioned a couple of laws which I will highlight again now. The first is New York State election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. I further indicated a number of unlawful means, including more additional false statements, including statements that were planned to be made to tax authorities. I also noted the federal election law cap on contribution limits.
But why weren't there those crimes charged? Why wasn't he charged with those crimes?
Well, I'm not going to go into our deliberative process on what was brought. The charges that were brought were the ones that were brought. The evidence in the law is the basis for those decisions.
You had expressed a year ago that you had some reservations about the case's readiness. Can you talk to us about what were some of the questions in your mind that needed to be answered in order to bring a case of this magnitude?
I'm not going to go chapter and verse into any thinking. What I will say is, I believe the time period you're talking about, I've been in office for a couple of months. The investigation, in my view, was not concluded into the conduct in particular that is the basis for the charges today. Since that time, we've had more evidence made available to the office and opportunity to meet with additional witnesses. So, as I said earlier, I've been doing this for 24 years. I don't bring cases prior to a thorough and rigorous investigation. Now, having done so, the case has been brought.
Your predecessor took a hard look at this case and decided not to charge it. Federal prosecutors took a hard look at this case and decided not to charge it. Do you believe you have new evidence that led you to decide to charge this, or why now?
Well, as I just mentioned, we have had available to the office additional evidence that was not in the office's possession prior to my time here. And as to your part of your question about the federal, we have a distinct and strong, I would say profound, independent interest in New York State. This is the business capital of the world. We regularly do cases involving false business statements. The bedrock, in fact, the basis for business integrity and a well-functioning business marketplace is true and accurate record keeping. That's the charge that's brought here, falsifying New York State business records.
We're going to take a few more. Yeah.
Thank you. DA Bragg, I'm just going to read back one line from your statement of facts. The participants also took steps that mischaracterized for tax purposes the true nature of payments and revenue from the scheme. Do you allege former President Trump was one of the participants who mischaracterized the payments for tax purposes?
I'm not going to go beyond the plain language statement of facts, which I think speaks for itself.
Can you please comment on the strength of the evidence that Trump personally intended to violate state election law, including actions that are charged in the indictment?
So the charge is falsifying business records. The charge requires, as I specified, criminal conduct that was concealed. One of the concealed crimes we allege is New York State election law. I sort of went through in our statement of facts, which I think many of you have in front of you, goes through things including text messages, emails, contemporaneous phone records, multiple witnesses. All of that will be, as you saw in the fall, borne out in a public courtroom in downtown Manhattan.
Last question is Jonah.
DA Bragg, the charges related to the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, the release from your office, also mentions another woman, Karen McDougal, as well as a doorman. Can you comment on how those players are related to the charges you've brought or to the case overall?
I'm glad you put your finger on that, because it's not just about one payment. It is 34 business records, 34 false statements in business records that were concealing criminal conduct. And the earlier question about New York State election law, when I talked about conspiracy to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. Those unlawful means, we allege, include the conduct set forth in the statement of facts, which is, additional false statements separate and apart from the charged ones in AMI documents, planned false statements to tasking authorities. It is not just that one $130,000 wire payment. Thanks so much.
Debates are essential not just for journalism but for humanity. It ignites our mind, opens it up for counter-opinion. To hear all views, opinion of all hues. Which is why the oldest running debate show on Indian news television is not 23 years old, but young at 23.
इस इनिशिएटिव को मैं अभिनंदन करता हूं कि सच को सच के रूप में पेश करने का उन्होंने साहस दिखाया.
So let us begin the big fight.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right and center with me, Vishnu Shom, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
20 years since we started, this music has been with you. Now, we want you to share your version of it. Let your inner artists out by creating an incredible remix of the NDTV signature track. Log on to ndtv.com/bestofndtv. Get inspired and submit your rendition. One winner gets an all-expense paid holiday for two. NDTV 24/7 20th year celebration.
This is NDTV. No noise, no shouting, and most importantly, no lies. Our lead story tonight. Big international story India is closely watching it. News that informs and inspires.
The news with Sonia Singh. Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. only on NDTV 24/7.
The only side we're on is yours.
Cross the distance between darkness and vision. Teach a generation that has lost all hope. Treat a patient from thousands of miles away. None of this was possible
till technology stepped in and made it possible. A selection of the finest stories from across the country where technology comes with a human touch.
Unleash your dreams with Snapdragon in collaboration with NDTV. Only on the NDTV network.
Years since we started this.
Donald Trump pleads not guilty to 34 felony counts. First former president or president ever of the United States to face criminal charges. Invented names won't change reality. India hits out at China for its move to rename 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh. Doklam figures in talks between Prime Minister Modi and the Bhutan king. India responds to OIC on Ram Navami violent statement. Anti-India agenda at play in OIC, says the statement from India. NDTV's explosive Siddaramaiah interview fallout. Rahul Gandhi tells top Karnataka leaders to set aside their differences. 7 killed in Sikkim's Nathula Pass avalanche. Hectic rescue operations on hold overnight to begin in the morning again. Ukraine war fallout. Finland joins NATO. NATO border with Russia almost doubles. Well, a there. You're watching NDTV. I'm Maha Siddiqui. The big story, Donald Trump's trial. Donald Trump, in fact, has pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of felony. In fact, he was presented before the judge in the Manhattan court today. And after that, he was he has in fact left Manhattan for Florida. He will be addressing his supporters this morning.
What about the change of venue? Just answer this question about the change of venue. There's a lot.
It's premature.
Right.
Premature.
Right. So why is he talking about that? And why is he trying to move this to a place like Staten Island?
Once again, we're three lawyers here to litigate and fight this case. We're not PR consultants. We're not social media consultants. Donald Trump has made one hell of a brand and became president of the United States with his social media and posts and everything else, his messages. We are here to talk about the case and litigate cases. We can't address what he posts or what he wants to post or did post.
But as his attorneys, have you told him to stop posting this rhetoric,
so
these messages about the judge?
What I said before was we can't, literally, we can't tell you what we've discussed with our
I
client.
understand,
So
but are
that's
you
the answer.
concerned that he's continuing to go after the judge, talking about the judge's wife, talking about the family? I mean, are you?
I don't think the judge was concerned about it.
Yeah, but any other defendant, wouldn't you be like?
Any other defendant wouldn't be here today.
On 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct. The defendant repeatedly made false statements on New York business records. He also caused others to make false statements.
Let me go across now to Namrata Brar for more details. Namrata, what are we expecting Donald Trump to say when he addresses his supporters this morning?
I think we've seen lots of indications in the run-up of this and even moments before we entered the Manhattan courtroom today, saying that it feels surreal. It's a witch hunt against him. He's using his old slogan, "Make America Great Again." And he's selling T-shirts with a mugshot of Donald Trump on his campaign page, saying this is going to be United States' next president in the 2024 elections. So a lot of obviously very strong statements are likely to come when Donald Trump speaks. But as of now, as we were playing out, we heard the Manhattan District Attorney's side of this case, of this extremely well-covered, globally sort of explosive case right now, saying that no person under American law is will not be tried, can be above the law. So you've heard the Manhattan District Attorney's side, and now we'll hear Donald Trump's side, which will say this is a witch hunt. It'll open a Pandora's box of potential lawsuits against every politician, whether it be from the Democratic side or whether it be Congress people to senators.
Namrata, some reports suggest that the next date of hearing is likely to be in December. That's almost half the year away. This seems like it's going to be a long-drawn process then.
Absolutely. The maximum sentence that he faces is about 136 years. So keep that in mind. He's been charged by 34 felony counts, as we've been reporting, each of them with 4 years and a maximum sentence of 136. But what is also important to note is that none of these counts, these are business fraud felony counts, none of these can potentially even translate into a prison sentence. So keep that in mind. However, obviously, there will be a lot of scrutiny and coverage of this what is expected to be a long trial and a long court process. It also opens it up for many other states to begin this process. Yes, we've been saying it's unprecedented. New York Post right now is calling it unprecedented, with the president's pun there. But essentially, this is the first of many that we expect other states to start with as well, including Donald Trump's role in the January 6th Capitol Hill riots, including his document concealment in Mar-a-Lago, as well as what he did in election interference in Georgia. So all those cases are likely to come across, and obviously this is going to be a new cycle which is going to keep both sides extremely active from both Republican and Democrats' platforms.
Namrata, with the kind of security that we were seeing in some of the vital spots in New York, is the city now heaving a sigh of relief that the events for today in Manhattan are over?
Yes, I do think there was a sense of anxiety which had built up, a somber mood here in New York City. I took the subway here and I could see faces which were unusually quiet coming here as well. The fact that you've got 36,000 New York Police Department personnel on the ground, this is unheard of in a city like New York, which has dealt with its share of disasters. You know, they say New York never stops for a moment, but it seemed today that the entire city had stopped. There were helicopters hovering around the Manhattan criminal courts. I could see from my vantage point snipers as well, including U.S. Marshals. The Secret Service, obviously, we know has been here, which is the first again in this unprecedented trial. So there has been a heightened sense of security build-up. There was also a fear that there could be potential protests which go out of control, as has been the case many a time. We know that Donald Trump himself called for death and destruction and showed pictures of him wielding a baseball bat at the Manhattan District Attorney. But we did not see a clash of that sort. We saw verbal exchanges, very strong verbal exchanges that I witnessed between the two camps, but not a full-blown encounter.
Namrata, also, what is the commentary that you're seeing in the U.S. To the demeanor of Donald Trump as he presented himself before the judge today?
Yes, it is a very unusual Donald Trump. We're used to seeing him extremely animated, off the cuff, and this is a very studied Donald Trump. This photograph of him sitting in the courtroom is going to become iconic. But you can see the messaging coming through there. He feels he's going to display that he's been wronged by the legal system, that the legal system has been weaponized against him. And he is definitely going to blow up this narrative as he prepares to be the Republican candidate going into 2024. It's interesting also, and we've talked about this, how his odds have rapidly changed over the course of this last 1 month, from trailing behind his closest potential rival, Governor Ron DeSantis, by 4 percentage points. He's now in the lead of 26 percentage points, and this is likely to firm up even more so. In fact, within the Republican Party, over 90%, this is a stunning number, 90% of Republicans within the party seem to suggest that Donald Trump has been wrongfully charged in this case, that even if they don't support him as a U.S. president, they do believe that he is in the wrong here. So those numbers will play out in the months to come.
Namrata, many thanks for joining us with all those details. Let's move on now. Even after Mamata Banerjee's warning to the administration to remain alert for the next few days and huge police presence in Rishra, a flare-up on Monday night at a railway-level crossing held up trains for 3 hours till the situation was brought under control. The Bengal governor visited the area on a fact-finding mission.
West Bengal Governor C.V. Ananda Bose in the Hooghly district, where violence flared up for the second straight day on Monday after stone pelting near a railway crossing last night in the Rishra town led to the suspension of train services on a crucial rail route for about 3 hours.
8 बजे हुआ झमेला उधर रेलवे लाइन के साइड में हम लोग घर में आकर के अपना लॉक आवाज बम का आवाज आ रहा था तो हम लोग घर में आकर के और अपना ये लॉक करके ये तीन दरवाजे हैं मेरे तीनों को लॉक करके हम लोग भीतर में बैठ गए, विद फैमिली सब एक जगह हो गए.
The districts of Hooghly and Havra near Kolkata have been on the boil after clashes broke out during Ram Navami rallies. Hours after Monday's fresh violence, Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee said these were not communal clashes but criminal acts by goons allegedly hired by the BJP.
It's a criminal violence. এটা হচ্ছে ক্রিমিনালদের নিয়ে ভায়োলেন্স করা। যে ছেলেটার ছবি আপনারা টিভিতে দেখেছেন, বন্দুক নিয়ে নৃত্য করছে রামনবমীর মিছিলে, রামচন্দ্র কি তাকে কানে কানে বলেছিল যে আমার কথা তোমরা বন্দুক নিয়ে মিছিল করো?
तो ममता बनर्जी कम्युनल जो सेंसिटिवनेस क्रिएट कर रही है, कम्युनल सिचुएशन क्रिएट कर रही है, ये ममता बनर्जी का काम है.
Amidst simmering tensions and heavy police deployment, an uneasy calm prevails in Rishra, and with a warning from the Chief Minister that there could be more trouble in sensitive areas, the police are keeping vigil and are on alert to ensure there are no more flare-ups. With camera person GD Shankar in Rishra, Saurabh Gupta, NDTV.
Let's move on now to Karnataka. NDTV's explosive Siddaramaiah interview fallout now. Rahul Gandhi has told the top Karnataka leaders of the Congress to set aside their differences. This as the second list is now expected from the party.
We have authentic information that BJP is unable to select its candidates. For BJP's ministers and MLAs are refusing to contest seats. We have information that hundreds of income tax officers, ED officers have been dispatched to Karnataka in order to conduct raids across the state on Congress leaders, Congress candidates, possible Congress candidates.
BJP in Karnataka is sinking. It can't come to power. The hate politics and Hindutva is not working in the coming assembly election in Karnataka. The only option left to them is money, power.
Well, firstly, of course, we hear that sources telling that the Congress wants to release the second list of the candidates for the Karnataka Assembly elections. The first list was at least announced for nearly 124 assembly segments. This was at least about, a few weeks ago, and now we see at least 50 seats have been confirmed. So the Congress, in fact, immediately called for this emergency presser, in fact, to also address the fact that, yes, they have zeroed in on nearly 50 candidates, because if you're clearly seeing there is a gap of at least about 2 to 3 weeks as far as, from the first list of candidate being announced as far as Karnataka Congress list is concerned. And we also did go on to see very categorically, in fact, Siddaramaiah talking in the press conference. This is by beginning attacking the ruling dispensation here, the BJP, against the Bommai government, talking about the most corrupt government. But however, he did, of course, go on to speak something on the similar lines to exclusively to NDTV as well, but not denying the fact that even when Congress was in power, they were also corrupt, but not to this extent. Now, that was something which Siddaramaiah did talk about. And also he does talk about that, the BJP utilized their money power as far as, the previous elections, especially in 2019, when the coalition between the Congress and the JDS collapsed. This was only after nearly at least about 17 of them, that both from the Congress majorly and from the JDS, they jumped the ship to the BJP, in fact, forming the government. So he does go on to attack at the BJP government. But what's important to note here is, from the start of this, as far as the election campaign goes, we have never seen, as far as Congress go beyond the 40% corruption, the poll narrative is concerned. clearly we look at whether it's developmental issues or agrarian crisis, farmer issues. Nothing of that sort has really come up in this particular election campaign.
All right, and still with Karnataka, 14 flights were diverted and several others were delayed as heavy rain battered parts of Bengaluru, causing heavy waterlogging on city outskirts where the Kempegowda International Airport is located. Normal operations later resumed, even as several parts were still inundated. Taking a very quick break now, news and updates will continue. Stay with us.
Gadgets 360 is here to help you with all your tech needs.
Gadget 360, Gadget Love.
Gadgets 360, Gadgets Love. You too can get some gadget love with buying guides, expert reviews, and all the latest news on Gadgets 360.
Debates are essential not just for journalism but for humanity. It ignites our mind, opens it up for counter-opinion. To hear all views, opinion of all hues. Which is why the oldest running debate show on Indian news television is not 23 years old, but young at 23.
इस इनिशिएटिव को मैं अभिनंदन करता हूं कि सच को सच के रूप में पेश करने का उन्होंने साहस दिखाया.
So let us begin the big fight.
In a deeply polarized world, where space for disagreement is shrinking, where take it or leave it defines discourse, we take a step back. A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right and center, conversations that get to the core of the debate. Left, right and center with me, Vishnu Shobh, 9 p.m. on NDTV 24/7.
20 years since we started, this music has been with you. Now, we want you to share your version of it. Let your inner artists out by creating an incredible remix of the NDTV signature track. Log on to ndtv.com/bestofndtv. Get inspired and submit your rendition. One winner gets an all-expense paid holiday for two. NDTV 24/7 20th year celebration.
This is NDTV. No noise, no shouting, and most importantly, no lies. Our lead story tonight. Big international story. India is closely watching it. News that informs and inspires.
The news with Sonia Singh. Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. only on NDTV 24/7.
The only side we're on is yours.
Cross the distance between darkness and vision. Teach a generation that has lost all hope. Treat a patient from thousands of miles away. None of this was possible
till technology stepped in and made it possible. A selection of the finest stories from across the country where technology comes with a human touch.
Unleash your dreams with Snapdragon in collaboration with NDTV. Only on the NDTV network.
Years since we started.
Welcome back. Finland officially became a NATO alliance member. It's the 31st member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, making and marking a major shift rather in the security landscape in northeastern Europe. Finland joining NATO has almost now doubled the alliance's border with Russia. Let's move on now, and the story of Delhi's most wanted caught in Mexico.
Delhi most wanted gangster arrested in Mexico in the first international operation led by the Delhi police with the help of America's Federal Bureau of Investigation. With a cash reward of 3 lakh rupees on his head, Deepak Boxer fled the country on a fake passport. He has been on the run ever since he killed Delhi-based builder and rival gangster Amit Gupta, and later took responsibility on social media.
पिछले 5 साल में 10 बहुत ही सेंसेशनल क्राइम्स में इसकी दीपक पहल की एलियस बॉक्सर की इन्वॉल्वमेंट रही.
Deepak Boxer was the head of the Gogi gang of Delhi. He has been accused of planning and executing the killings of his rivals to avenge his accomplice Jitendra Gogi's murder. One of the capital's most high-profile gangsters, Boxer hit the headlines after he freed his then boss Gogi from police custody in Haryana and attacked policemen at a Delhi hospital to free a gang member. Vedant Agarwal for NDTV.
On to some sports news now. Sai Sudarshan played a match-winning knock against Delhi to take the Titans to a 6-wicket win, which is their second of the season. But the win was set up but their fast and explosive bowlers Mohammad Shami, Alzari Joseph and as well as spin whiz Rashid